I would like to give the stages for you, so feel free to enter the room, and I will be gone as soon as you appear on screen.
Hey, can you hear me okay? Well, I hope you can hear me okay. Brilliant. Hi everyone, and welcome to, I guess I'm kicking off the 5th day of Linguahackers. Alors, qui s'est diverti, qui has enjoyed the French lesson that you guys have just had? I hope you've enjoyed that. It looks like I need one as well, doesn't it? I've been spending so much time on Welsh learning, and I just published a blog article this week on French as well. So today I'm going to kind of take you through a few slides, and I'm going to introduce you to what I have found is the most important, really the secret to success. I think this genuinely is the secret to success that so many people overlook in language learning. Now I'm going to come off this slide here because it looks a bit funny, and we're going to go straight to my introduction. So hello, in case you have not heard from me before, my name is Kerstin and I'm originally from Germany. I moved to England in 2003 to continue my language studies. I actually studied 5 languages in Germany, 5 different ones, including Latin, which I loved, and then came to England to be in school and study and take my degree in English and French. I also have a master's in translation studies, so I have worked with languages for a very long time, and I'm really excited to be in this conference organized by Russians, really, by Akintsev and by Ruslan, because I absolutely just have so many good memories of working in Russia and in Kazakhstan. So очень приятно to all of you Russian viewers. I'm going to, if you've got questions, if you can pop them in the question box up there, if you can, then please do that, and then I'll take them at the Q&A at the end. And in the meantime, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the unexpected secret to success in language learning. If you don't watch this, you can't succeed. Absolutely not. Okay. Okay, now I write about languages all the time, and I've been writing about languages for 5 years. I've got a podcast where I've spoken to many polyglots and language professionals, teachers, course creators, writers, fellow podcasters. I have spoken, I have spoken to people that you have heard of, like Benny Lewis, and I co-host with Lindsay Williams, but I've also spoken to people who no one's ever heard of, yet they speak 15 languages. So hopefully I've got something useful to share with you today. Let's get going. Now, are you guys, I always like to ask a question at the start of these presentations, and then my question for you is, are you happy with your progress in language learning at the moment? And just pop your answer in the chat box right there. Are you happy? Are things going well? Are you excited? Is it going fast? So, Andrew says he's happy. That's good. None of us, and this I think is very common. Oh yes, so we've got 2 or 3 people who are quite excited. But most of us, we don't think we're necessarily that, we're certainly not finished, we're certainly not done, I think. So my second question to you is, if you are not one of the 2 people who said that they're happy, tell me why not? Like, what's holding you back? That's a really interesting one. And I'm going to tell you today about the thing that I think does hold a lot of us back, and perhaps how you can help yourself a little bit there. So we've got slow progress, which is Andy, that is a very big problem, and hopefully I'll have something to contribute today. And then there's just this sense, that we're not making enough progress. I'm seeing this come up again and again, and I genuinely, I commiserate with you guys, because it's hard, right? It's hard to feel like we're getting somewhere. And the idea of progress is really something that I want to talk to you today about, and just address what progress really means. Just allow me to click this so that things stop dinging and binging in the background here. So your language learning progress. First of all, it's like some of you already said, language learning is something that, I think we need to every now and then remind ourselves why we are here. The vision, the basic vision. It's not going as fast as we think maybe it would go at the start, but think about why you started this in the first place. Languages do so much for so many of us. For many of you, if you're learning English or perhaps your second foreign language, a lot of you might have come into this because it increases your career prospects. Now, I'm German and I teach German, so something that I love to share with people is that learning German, if you are American, learning German is the language that will make you the most money above all other languages in your career. More than Spanish, learning German is really lucrative. And we all know, more than being American and German, learning English, if you're not a German speaker, if you're not an English speaker already, is so lucrative, right? So a lot of us get in it for the money, for the career, for the opportunities. Language learning also makes you more attractive to people that you want to attract. It makes you sexier, which is something that I know a lot of people actually, it increases your confidence, it increases your speaking skills, and in that way it can really make you more attractive. And there is also the phenomenon of being a different person when you're speaking another language. Do any of you feel that way? That is certainly something that people have reported. I just feel more confident, I feel more free when I'm speaking Spanish or French. So languages also obviously open up a way to travel the world. And this goes beyond just being able to go somewhere. I know that when I traveled to Kazakhstan, I very quickly in Almaty realized I have to learn English. I have to learn Russian like yesterday, because the script everywhere was in Kazakh and in Russian, and I couldn't read it at first. So I had to open up the world like right now, and that made a big difference for me. It opens up the world. Also with things like Passport de Servo, the Esperanto community literally opens doors to each other, and you will have a sofa to sleep on, a bed to sleep in, anywhere in the world. Languages are genuinely going to make such a difference to you. Now, of course, it keeps you young. I like to quote the statistic and the study result that learning a language, a second language, can delay the onset of degenerative diseases, so things like Alzheimer's, the ways that your brain doesn't work so much anymore when you get older. Languages can delay this by up to 5 years. That's more than any medication, right? So this makes a huge difference. It definitely keeps you young. And finally, this is my reason to learn languages. This is why I'm learning Welsh at the moment, why I'm sort of playing around with a few other languages, learning Esperanto. I am serious about one language and I play in one or two others at any given time. And I have studied 8 or 9 languages so far because it gives me a richer and a more curious life. I love learning for life, and I think that is why I like polyglots and the polyglot community, because this is full of people who are curious and who want to learn for life. So hopefully that's you guys too. And this connects to the idea of the progress, right? So on the one hand, we want to learn for life. We want to change our whole life through language learning. But on the other hand, we worry, right? And we think like, oh, I'm not done. I'm not making progress fast enough. I'm not fast enough. So there's these two different sides that we're balancing, and that's difficult. So now I want to talk to you about the many ways that I think it's hard work and that hold people back from what I have seen. So number one, it's hard, and tell me if you find this as well. Unless you are a student and your full-time job is language learning, it's really hard to find time because you have so many other things to do in your life. You have a job, maybe you have family to look after, you've got kids, you've got to travel around, you know, you have to somehow get some food on the table. This is hard work. And that's something I found when I first started in, how old was I? I was 21 or 22, and I finished my master's, and that was the first time that I finished school and I wasn't in full-time education. So it wasn't my job to learn a language anymore. All my life, this was the thing. It was easy. So someone asked earlier in the chat, when I learned 5 languages, did I learn them at the same time? No, because I couldn't. My school didn't have all of them on at the same time, but I have always learned in school 3 languages at the same time, and I loved it because it was my full-time job. But then suddenly I had a different full-time job. I was working in a university, in an office, and I had to travel and organize things, and people at work spoke English all the time, and I found, oh, okay, I'm just gonna learn some Polish. I would love to learn Polish. Went to 3 Polish classes. And then the course ended because it was only a taster course. And I had the book, I had the materials, and I never looked at them again because I didn't even know what to do. And then when I was learning Russian, I again found, oh my God, where do I start? What do I do? And the book that I bought was actually called Russian in 10 Minutes a Day. And with this book, I learned how to learn. I learned that I have to do this all the time, and I learned how to find the time. So for me, the too many things to do problem was huge, huge. And I always had to try to fit it in. And the only way I learned to fit it in, I will tell you more about this later, is to do a very small session every day. Now, secondly, you don't know how to start. This was my Polish problem. I went to a class, and when the class finished, I didn't know what to do. Right? You don't even know how to start. You look around, you search online course or evening course or books or what should I do? And this sometimes can completely stop people, right? It's hard work. Number 3. You all told me this, and I'm so grateful to you for sharing and for being so open, you know, is that your progress is too slow, you know, and this makes language learning a lot harder. And it's funny because we focus so much on the progress because we're doing so much work, and all we want is for this work to pay off. So it's hard. This is really hard. Now, how many of you have had this happen to you? You lose interest, and then you just stop following your routine. You stop learning in the same way. It's just, yeah, this was interesting about a week ago. I had all my books, I had my calendar, I had my bullet journal. I was ready, I was speaking, I was doing fluent in 1 week. And then 1 week later, it's all gone. It's all gone. And this is very, consistency is a large problem in language learning, and it can trip us up. And finally, this is, I think, I keep coming across this problem again. So the final problem is, you think because the progress is slow, because you don't have time and you don't know if you're doing even the right thing, self-learning a language is so hard because you secretly hear somewhere in the back of your mind, there's a voice that says, you can't do this, you're never going to learn this, you're never going to learn this. And I will tell you now, I have been learning Welsh for 2.5 years, and I was watching TV this week, and I needed subtitles, and I said to my husband, I'm never going to learn Welsh. I'm just never, even though I understand way more, it was like, and then it becomes like, car park, outrageous, fine. And then and now it's sort of like, I was going blah, 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 and he said blah, 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 and blah, blah, and then driving blah, blah, blah. You know, it's more and more I can understand, but I still feel like, oh, I want to be perfect. Why am I not perfect? And this is such a problem. So I just, all these problems, I can tell you guys now, you are not alone. You are not alone. So what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? If, you know, all these questions. And I think I want to know, where have you looked for solutions? And I have, obviously, I think there is one place where we are all, or you guys are looking for solutions pretty much right now, right? Do you know what I'm talking about? I'll take a little sip and you can tell me, where are you looking for solutions at the moment? Everywhere is a really good answer. Everywhere, the internet, and so often we are looking at exactly like you're looking, you know, you're looking at me. I'm honored. You know, podcasts, native speakers, you know, immigrant communities is a fantastic one. It's so interesting, you know, but the only way that we can really learn this is to look at other people. But the problem is that sometimes we spend so much time looking that our to-do list gets huge and we start thinking, well, I'm just going to do exactly what they are doing. Exactly, right? Benny Lewis, he's learned languages. He must have the answer. Steve Kaufman, that's the answer. So, and then it's like, you know, like wherever you look, you try to find the perfect answer. But there is no way to blindly follow somebody else and get to your destination, because your destination is not theirs, if that makes sense. Even though in our head it looks the same. Oh yeah, fluent in French. But they're not the same person, and people have different learning styles. So what I have done for you, for myself really, but I want to share it with you, is I did look at what a lot of successful language learners have in common. Now you have to bear with me, because this slide, I had some problem designing slides, but I think this is the to-do list of the average language learner, right? It's pretty much everything. I'm just going to do everything. And this is great, and you have this huge list of things to do. But when you've got this many things to do, you want to read some books, you want to do spaced repetition, I'm going to do Anki, I'm going to do podcasts, I'm going to learn like this, I'm going to learn like that, learn like this, learn like that. Oh my God, da, da, da. You know, you're looking for all of the solutions. And what I would like to teach you guys today is that it's okay to drop like almost everything now and instead to simplify. That's the big word I want you to imagine. Normally it's on the slide, but like I said, I had a slide problem. A slight slide problem. Sorry, comedian. Is simplify. Just imagine this, simplify, right? You only really need one process to follow. And that's this magical secret that I have for you today. So, there is only really one way I think that we will really do well. And that is to think of language learning as a habit. That's the solution. So what habits do you think you have at the moment? Not language learning, but what are other habits? And the definition of a habit is an action that is basically automatic. Something you just do. Something that just sort of happens. Facebook! Yes! You know, exactly. Facebook is huge here, right? Driving, there are things that you just do, or having your morning coffee. Like for me, in our house, coffee is a thing that just happens. We don't even know like who made it. It's just there, and we're both happy about it, me and my partner. But you know, just habits. Driving, great example. And just, you know, like reading, or you know, how many of you today have taken a picture on your mobile phone? That would be a total, if we see something now, that's a total habit because you do it without even thinking. And the definition of a habit is all there. It's like you have a trigger, you take an action, and you have a reward. So your trigger is you see something interesting or beautiful. The action that is always the same action is you whip out your phone and you go, well, hang on, let me do it now. I'll take a picture of you guys. And then your reward is that you have a picture. And this is huge, right? So how can we build habits? That's the question I have been asking myself over the last year. How can we think of language learning as a habit, and what are the benefits of this? And here are my 3 top benefits. Number 1, language learning is no longer really, you don't think about progress so much anymore because it becomes who you are, right? Instead of thinking, what I do is I'm trying to get fluent in French, you are thinking, I am the person who learns French. That is me. I am the person who learns languages. I love this. This is part of my identity. And that way you create space for yourself because you stop thinking, when is this going to be finished? When will I get there? And you start thinking about what you're doing right now. What will feed your habit? What will feed, what does this person that you are want to do? And then naturally what you want to do is learn a language. So I think this mindset shift is huge, and I'm so grateful so pleased to be sharing it with you guys today. Because when you become a language learner, then suddenly you have got all of the time ever, because really you have got your lifetime. So I don't know how many of you are under 25 years old. How many of you are under 20? And then think how much time there is in your life. You can learn so many languages and you can become a master in almost all of them. But you don't need to worry so much about the progress anymore, because the gift that this mindset gives you is time. And the gift that having a habit gives you is freedom from worrying about progress, and instead start thinking about yourself as somebody who has this habit. So hopefully this makes sense. Let's go into a bit more detail. So for planning your language learning, I think you need to think about it like a project, in the sense that you set yourself good goals and you think about a finite set of time. So don't think about the whole language, but instead take on little projects. I know that, if you look at what Benny does, there's actually a similar sense in there, because he has mini missions. And for me, it's usually, I work with something that I made called the Language Habit Toolkit. So I'll show it to you now. And I created this sort of worksheet for myself, but for others too. On language goals, I ask myself, what am I working on right now? And where do I want to be in 30 days? And I go through the core skills to get there. So I'll tell you more about this in a minute. Soya is 65. That's amazing. That's amazing. And I have met so many people who later in life, they became like the most fluent people. It's so cool. So cool. Okay, but when you're actually doing it, I have a little bit of a delay, so I'm only seeing your ages now, but oh man, it makes me so happy that there are lots of mature language learners here. You guys are the best. You are the wisest, just such impressive people. I'm a fan. I have worked with language learners in their 80s, and they were among the best I've ever met. Okay, so planning it, project. Once you've got your project set, forget about your goals for the everyday. Zoom out to plan, zoom in to do. And when you do it, it's just a habit. It's just a habit. It's something that you do every day. It just goes on and on and on. And you don't worry about it anymore until you have hit the milestone that you already set yourself, maybe in 30 days, maybe in 2 months, and then you stop, you zoom out, and you review. So think of it as sort of zooming in and zooming out. And that way we can think of making the language habit a sensible thing that still gets us to where we need to be. Okay, so here is what I have found in my own language learning. And I tell you right now, I am terrible for indecision, for looking for the best method. It took me 5 years to buy a car because I kept thinking, do I even need one? And what is the best car? And how much money do I want to spend on a car? And who's selling a car at the moment? And maybe I should go and talk to them. Oh, I'm not sure. Maybe there is a better way of doing this. Maybe there is a better way of doing it. I was looking and looking and looking. And when I'm learning something, it's the same. Looking for the best way of doing it. And there is only really one way to do this in language learning. And I had to find a way that lets me look at all the exciting methods. The learn from day one, the gold list, the using link, using this, using that, whatever courses. And I only really needed one process, and the process needed to be flexible enough to take every method, polyglot method, Michelle Thomas method, computer-based, book-based, anything that I wanted to do, and just have like a container for it all. And that's what I had to create. So the language habit process for me is the container of all of the other, do I do forward? Do I do a podcast? Da, 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 da. It's everything fits into this container. Are you ready? Are you ready for what I'm going to share? So I am not very good at mathematics, so I'm going to show you the worst formula ever. Well, worst in a mathematical sense, but maybe the best on language learning. And that is called the language habit formula, or it's the formula that I think is the secret to teaching yourself a language consistently, successfully, and really in a way that leads you to this richer, more curious life that we want. So I'm going to keep you hanging, drink another sip of water. Are we ready for the language habit formula? Here we go. So it looks like you are the best chat I've ever seen. You guys are so fun. You guys are so fun. I love it. Okay, so here we go. Ta-da! Okay, so what I think we need to do is to plan, track, and review times, maybe divided by, but I think times, sort of factor in the core skills of language learning. And this is a secret ingredient in this formula, I think. Individuality. I just asked you your ages. The youngest I saw was 15. The oldest I saw was 71. You guys watching this right now, 300 people are watching this, you are not all the same. You are not all the same. So individuality and the confidence to say, that doesn't work for me, that is so important, especially in a world where people tell you, all the polyglots say this, say that, say that, say that. So planning, tracking, and reviewing. This is a core process that I follow religiously. Times the core skills and individuality. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about each of these steps. Number 1, planning. So without a destination, you are going nowhere. Unfortunately, this is very, very often true. Even if you're in a labyrinth, it will guide you, and in your mind, you still want to get to the middle. You might be going like this, but you want to get to the middle. And then all you want is to get out. So, without a destination, you're going nowhere. So your first step is to plan. For me, planning is based on 2 types of goals that I work with in the habit process when I coach or when I share it or in my toolkit. And those are vision goals and path goals. Vision goals and path goals. And I've got a download for you that you can download at the end of this, where you will read a little bit more about them and where the difference is. So the path goal is really super practical. That just tells you what to do. The vision goal is What makes you excited, motivated? That is the answer to that problem of I got bored. So you need to build both. Number 2, tracking. It doesn't really matter in my mind how exactly you track. I think it's not great to let an app do it for you that also wants to teach you. So something like Duolingo, because when you are watching television in your target language, or maybe doing a chapter in a book, your grammar book or something, or you writing gold list, by hand, then Duolingo, you can't go into Duolingo and say, I did something else today, right? So it's better to have a way of tracking it that is more straightforward. The other issue I have with most straightforward apps is that when you're tracking and you want to build a streak, there's an app that I use called Streaks, for example, for things like walking. And if you use that, the answer is either yes or no. And I want to track in a little bit more detail. I want to see how much time I spent on my language, what I actually did. I want to see, is my core skill profile in balance? So am I doing the same? Am I doing the same for my speaking as I am for my reading? Because I should be. And so those things all need to be, in my mind, need to be tracked. So you want to be tracking in a little bit more detail, but what really matters is that you just make a note of what you did, ideally every day, because step 3 in this process is to review. And reviewing is so important. When I first created the Language Habit Toolkit, the feedback I got from my testers, I tested it with real life language learners, the feedback I got was, where is this, where is the final step? I feel like my mission is not complete. There's something missing, because the first tracker just asked them to track. And there was no way of kind of having a milestone in the process. And I felt it too. So when I got the feedback, my instant reaction was, you are right. So I built a reviewing tool. And this reviewing tool is really important. But it's not something that you have to get from me or from the tracker. What's important is that you check in with yourself. Maybe I like doing once a month. You could do it once a week if you spend 5 hours a day studying. Obviously, you've got a lot more data than I do in my 15 minutes a day. So reviewing consists of just stopping, looking back, thinking, what did I do? How much did I get done? What worked? What didn't? And if it didn't work, can I stop doing it? Or is it just that I don't enjoy it? And is there a more fun way of doing it? Reviewing gives you that zooming out. Right? That's when you're looking at the project. In the middle of it all, you are doing a habit. Okay, so core skills. I believe that there was still a little bit of a... Okay, so it was a little bit of a question of what core skills are. For me, the 4 core skills, and a lot of people like adding grammar and pronunciation to these, but I think if you practice all 4 of these, then you don't need to practice pronunciation or grammar separately, because you will be learning them. You will be learning them because these are your skills that incorporate everything else from vocabulary to grammar. So you want to get better and more capable at these: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. They are all important. So in fact, the first book I wrote, I've got it over there, this thing, it's called Fluency Made Achievable. It's all about the core skills, because I noticed when I was teaching myself a language, people get really excited about speaking and nobody worries about writing. But if you can't write, then you can't speak as well. And it's just like, I kept seeing this with people, that there is a problem when your core skill profile isn't balanced, right? So you want to try and maintain focus on all 4 of those core skills. And to me, this is really important. This is as important as planning, tracking, and reviewing, which is why the formula is as it is. And then, of course, individuality, right? So within the framework, as long as you're practicing the core skills, do whatever you want to do. And that means if you don't want to speak to people, If you'd rather speak to Glossica, or if you'd rather speak to your phone for now, that's okay. And internally, the desire will come when you are ready. So you can kind of trust your inner wisdom, right, to do those 4 skills. So let me remind you of this formula, because I think it is a crucial one. It's really important, and I want you guys to, to tell me, like, what do you think? I think this is, in all of my language learning, which has been, now I've been learning languages for 24 years, the trick to teaching myself was to learn these 5 things: to plan, to track and review, and then to really factor in the core skills, to really base it in those 4 skills that they are so important, and then to add in my own individuality. Like I present the podcast, Creative Language Learning Podcast, together with Lindsay, and something that we have talked about many times is that she really loves listening to music in other languages. She loves listening to music in Spanish, she loves listening to music in French, whatever language she can find, she will try and find music. Now, I love music, but I don't get excited about music in other languages. Now, television in other languages, shows, stories, I love it. I love it. I need it in my life. And in Welsh, I'm lucky because the Welsh language is a British language, so I have really easy access to the Welsh TV channel, and everything is subtitled. It's very easy for me to get access to this. I can switch the subtitles on and off. This is, for me, this is huge. This is an absolute winner. So I like watching television, but I can't follow the Lindsay method for so many other reasons as well. Like if you listen to us, you'll know that we are so different. But the overall core of it all is really built in this formula. So we both follow the formula, but the individuality is huge and it's important. And really, because some people are 71 and some people are 15 and many of us are somewhere in between. And I really want you guys to kind of take away that you can do whatever you want to do, but I think it's good to have this container, this framework for it. So plan, track and review in that order. Don't track first. Plan first, then track, then review. And make sure you factor in the core skills. Now, if you are looking for something, a sort of ready-made set that really pulls this all together, I have created something called the Language Habit Toolkit, which you can purchase from my website. It's school.fluentlanguage.co.uk, and that contains worksheets which are designed to help you plan, track and review, exactly like that. There are worksheets to separate the planning into vision goals and path goals, and there are 2 different trackers, so you can just use them, print them out ready-made. And I've also written a book, so that's all included in the package. There's a video in there, so whatever you want to start with is fine. There's a quick start guide in it as well. So I would recommend the toolkit if this resonated with you, and if you've been feeling like you're not making progress, you're not feeling organized, you're not really getting anywhere, you're losing motivation. This is a process that I think is going to help you massively. Okay, but I also want to give you something for free, because you have sat here and been the best chat ever and listened to me. So if you go to fluentlanguage.co.uk/linguahackers, you will get a new 1-pager. It's actually a 2-pager PDF that just kind of takes you through the process as I see it. So there's a little bit more detail and you've got it all to read, and it's just a free PDF. You sign up to my newsletter and I'll send it straight to you. That's from me to say thank you. So I wrote it yesterday after I wrote this presentation, so that you guys can, participate in this, because I really want to spread the word about language habit, not language 2 months and then you're finished. To me, language is about identity, and every polyglot I have spoken to, I promise you now, I have spoken Ollie Richards, Benny Lewis, big names, but every single one has done this has adopted this. That is who they are. Language learning becomes who you are, and then you automatically, like, I mean, I know somebody was asking how many languages have I learned, and I mean, it depends. I have learned. I'm fluent in 4 at the moment. I used to be more fluent in Spanish. Now I am hopefully in Spanish, if that's a word. Not quite as fluent in Spanish, but I have intensively studied 8 languages and played in another 5, really. So it's a very difficult thing to say, but I usually say I've studied 8 languages, and I know I'm going to study 8 more. I've got a list, you know. Okay. Here we go. So that's it really from me. Plan, track, review, core skills, individuality. And I would love to take your questions. So I think I'm just going to, Ruslan, if you've got any better idea on how to do this, let me know. Okay, but otherwise I'm just going to kind of go with the questions that I see, and if I really don't answer it, then maybe just repeat it. Okay, so I have, and I'm going to try and read out your name if it is in Cyrillic, because that's how good my Russian is. Okay, so we've got I've got a question from Paul saying, what are your core skills? So just to kind of go back over the core skills in case you missed it. I mean, my personal core skills are that I'm really funny and I speak 4 languages. But what you really want to know is, what are the core skills? And to me, they are listening, reading, speaking, and writing. I'm obsessed with these. I think you can't learn a language if you don't practice all 4 of these in some way. Okay. Next question from Sapphire. Hey! Okay, this a question says, what's your best tip for mastering German grammar? Do you know, what is my best tip for mastering German grammar? It depends on where you are. My tip for mastering anything is, don't think about mastery unless you are really far ahead, but to look at like your next milestone. So it kind of depends on what your level is at the moment. If you are very, very advanced, I would say word order. But if you are still maybe at A1, A2 level, word order is not what you need to worry about. Then I would say concentrate on cases, and out of those, forget the genitive case, nobody needs it, and instead study the accusative case and the nominative case. I do have some German courses on my website. There is a German grammar course which is for beginners, so I would recommend you check that one out. It covers some basic word order, but really it's a course for beginners and returners is what I say. Okay, so Felipe, do you have a YouTube channel? Yes, I do, and the name of my YouTube channel is Fluent Language, so that's quite easy to find. So you can find me on there, Fluent Language. B1, B2 in German. So coming back to Sapphire, if you're at B1 and B2, if you're feeling confident about cases, I think something at the B level that I think is difficult, that really makes a difference, is to try and play around with adjective agreement. So it's cases, but like cases plus. But really, the B levels are about, to me, they're about getting better in general. So really get a lot of input. Don't worry too much about grammar. Work with a tutor who will tell you what mistakes you make, and then focus on your own mistakes. Okay, so setting goals. There's several people asking about setting goals. So I'll tell you about my own goal setting process. I have a long-term process, that I call vision goals. And you, like I said, there's a little bit more in the one-pager that you can download from fluentlanguage.co.uk/linguahackers. That should take you to a little form where you put your email. But really, so my long-term goals, they are the ones that they're about inspiration, they're vision goals. And the reason I saw vision goals is because I noticed that a lot of language learners, when you ask them what their goal is, they say, I want to get fluent. And I understand why, because that's not as sexy as saying, I want to finish lesson 9 in my Welsh course, right? It's just not as sexy. You want to get fluent. Everybody wants to get fluent. But becoming fluent doesn't mean necessarily a lot in real practical terms. But it is important to have those goals. It's important, and I think it's important to use those goals to drive you, to motivate you, to keep you going. And you want to get as specific as possible with them. You want to get as specific as possible, because when you are really very specific in the vision, what it does is it gives you something to aim towards. And everything that you take, every action that you take kind of goes in that direction. So the vision goal, my vision goal, is this. I think an example will explain this well. My vision goal is, last year, it used to be, I want to speak Welsh when I go to the Welsh Festival. And then I went to the Welsh Festival, I spoke some Welsh, yay! Now, the next step for me was, and if you want to win Welsh Learner of the Year, you have to be fluent and you have to be, publicly. And I thought, oh my God, I love communicating the fact that I speak Welsh. I love promoting this language. It's a very small minority language. I really enjoy learning it. And so I thought, I would love to win Welsh Learner of the Year. You get to be on a stage, you get, people will applaud. It will say, oh my God, Kerstin, and they give you maybe some flowers or something. And I thought, this is my motivation. At the National Festival of Welsh Language and Culture, I would love to win Welsh Learner of the Year. This is not something that I can work towards on a daily basis, not really, except to learn Welsh. But it gives me this big inner motivation. It makes me think, oh my God, no, this is why I'm doing this. It will make me so happy when I can do this. It will make me so happy when I can go to Wales and, people are surprised, etc. And, for me, that's my vision goal. Now, the second part of this is your path goal. So first, think about a vision. When you are fluent, when you are perfect, when everything has worked out, where are you? What does it feel like? Who is around you? Who is listening to you speak in this other language? Is it a loved person? Is it, if you're a guy, some guys I know learn a language to impress girls. So is it that you want to impress girls? Everything goes. It's all good to go. And learning like this, learning with a vision goal in mind, the more you know about it, the more it's going to keep you going when things get boring. Okay, now, practical. Language goals, path goals, are based on 3 questions. Number one, what are you working on right now? Number 2, where do you want to be in a short time? I usually pick 30 days, but you could pick 7 days, you could pick 2 months, to think about how busy you are. And number 3, what will you do to get there in each of the core skills? So remember, and then you've put everything into this formula, right? So that's how I set my goals. So for example, my language goals at the moment look like this. Finish Linguahackers, which is a magazine, and review 3 vocab lists by the 24th of October. So far, I have done a little bit of reading in the magazine, but I need to get my move on. Also, start a new TV show. That's my listening skill. To watch once a week. And I found not 1, but 2, so I did well. Get a 30-minute partner every week and finish lesson 8 in Say Something in Welsh, which I finished today. And that was my speaking exercise. So I go with, and this is from the Language Habit Toolkit, which I highly recommend, of course. I have just got a worksheet where all of those questions are built in. And then I have 4 categories: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And I set myself a goal for each of them. And when that goal is achieved, I go to the next one. Okay, so I've talked a lot about goal setting. Are there any other questions? Do you think it's nonsense to learn a language if you won't be able to speak it anywhere but by yourself? No, I don't think it's nonsense. I think the worst reason to learn a language is because you think you should. I think the best reason to learn a language is because you want to. I think if you learn because you should, that's often the reason why you stop. So I think you have permission to learn Latin, to learn High Valyrian, and to learn Tokipono, and that's absolutely fine if you never meet anybody, as long as it brings you joy and it gives you the richer, more curious life. I think that's absolutely fine. Okay. Our room. Interesting question. What do you do at the beginning so that you don't ruin your beginning? You mean at the beginning of learning a brand new language? I love this question. Number one, I don't think you can really ruin your beginning. If you ruin your beginning, just start again differently. But what I normally do at the start to help me feel confident quickly is I study pronunciation. I tend to start with pronunciation. In Russian, I started with Cyrillic alphabet, which is connected to pronunciation. This is why core skills are important, because hang on, I'll show you the other slide while I'm talking. Because there is a speak and spell connection. So when I'm learning Cyrillic language, or when I'm learning Cyrillic script, then I am also learning how to make the sounds of the Russian language, and then I want to practice it with words, and then I am practicing pronunciation. So my first thing to study is usually pronunciation, and then it gets a lot easier. Okay, how do you increase your writing and reading skills in English from B1 to C1? Do it more, really. Reading skills are best trained by reading. Writing skills are best trained by writing. Writing skills are also well trained by reading. So I think what you should do, I mean, I have several exercises in this. So get this, it's on Amazon, it's good. But I think a great exercise if you want to train your writing and reading together, number one is you have to work with a tutor. You have to get feedback. Right? You have to work with a person who will give you feedback. Number two, read something that you enjoy, something that you love. In English, for me, a book that I really loved when I was at this level was it's not really a book, it's a play, and we did it in school, and it made me so happy, and I really enjoyed it. It was called An Inspector Calls, and I think it's a school classic. So I really enjoyed An Inspector Calls. And also the book Catcher in the Rye, which is, it's written sort of, teenagers enjoy it because it's sort of like angry teenager, but it's actually great to read at any point in your life. So just read something you're going to enjoy, and then the writing skill, summarize it. You know, like write down what happened in this chapter, write down what you think about it, and then share that with a tutor. I think that's really, really important. Don't think a podcast will make you better at reading, because it won't. Right? You have to train in different ways. This is really, really important. Okay, I have maybe time for one more question, so I'll just take a next question, a little question. Okay, Olga, do you speak Russian? Я не really говорю по-русски. No, I don't speak enough Russian. I sort of understand basic words like хорошо and yeah, работа, and things like that. I can read the Cyrillic language, but I can't really speak Russian. Not in any way that would impress anybody. So I'm not going to impress anybody anytime soon. Yes, I will always show my book's name again. It is this, Fluency Made Achievable. Get it. It's very short, as you can see. It's not a lot of work, but it's a lot of benefit, I think. But I wrote it, right? I wrote this 4 or 5 years ago, and sometimes I still look at it and I think, oh God, I'm probably really going to hate this. But everything, same as the Language Habit Toolkit, I am so I try to make the best things at the time, and I have never looked back and thought this is rubbish. So this is good. It's good stuff. That's my website and Amazon. That's it. I can't get it in bookshops because I didn't have a fancy publisher. Okay, that's it from me, really. Thank you guys so much. I had a really fun time with you. I had a really good audience. I hope you get something out of downloading the little PDF that I made you. It's about 2 pages and it explains everything I have talked about today. So it goes into my language habit building process, and I hope you got a lot out of the language habit. And I'm going to be off now.
Who enjoyed this talk? Let's thank our dear friend Kerstin for this lovely talk. Oh yeah, Ruslan is also here. Hi, Ruslan.
No, go ahead. Yeah, just want to present Steve, but go ahead.
Yeah, everyone wants to present Steve. Yeah, so the next speaker is Steve Kaufmann. Steve Kaufmann is a very famous polyglot among, well, not only in the polyglot community, but Steve has a very popular YouTube channel with hundreds and hundreds of subscribers. I think it's actually more than 100,000 subscribers. He is also the co-founder of Link. Link is a platform where you can, among other things, improve your reading and listening skills. I use it myself. I really like it. I've been using it for Polish and Russian. I improve my reading and listening skills using Steve's website. We still have 2 minutes here. Who's waiting for Steve? Yes. Oh yes, thank you, Ruslan. Yes, for reminding of the recordings. Yes, and if you didn't have time to watch all the talks, but you would like to get access to all the recordings, you can go to the link that Ruslan just posted here, linguahackers.com/record. Okay, Steve Kaufmann is already there. He's ready. Okay, you don't see your slide. I will get your slide. Just a second. Yes. Let's see if I can. Yes, fluent. Wait a moment. Okay, maybe there's more than 2 people clicking on the slides. So I would ask for the moderators not to click on the slide so that Steve can find his slides. And Steve, if you're ready to go, we are all waiting and looking forward to watching your presentation. Steve Kaufmann live, yes. So if you're ready, feel free to come to the stage. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
We can all see and hear very well.
Very happy to. Okay. Now I hear an echo. Okay. There we are. So I'm very happy to be here. You know, this is the world we live in. I normally am in Vancouver, British Columbia. But I had decided quite some time ago to make a trip to Israel and Greece, and studied a bit of Hebrew, a lot more Greek, and but in this world, it doesn't matter where we are, we can connect, and I'm very happy to be able to join with you and talk a bit about a subject that has become a favorite, sort of an obsession of mine, which is learning languages. I would say I'm now 72. In the last 10 years, I've learned 8 or 9 languages, which is more than I learned in the previous 60 years. So language learning has little to do with age, I can assure you. Where in Greece, I'll resist interrupting my presentation to answer these questions, which I can deal with later on. So, fluency. I think the goal in language learning for everyone, I shouldn't say for everyone, there are people who learn languages because they're going to visit the country and they want to be able to order a beer or find the bathroom, and so that's fine. But in my own case, and I think for a lot of people, the goal is fluency. And there's a lot of discussion about what do we mean by fluency. And if you look at how different languages, the terms that are used in different languages, like fluency in English implies something that's flowing. It flows. It doesn't have to flow fast. You don't have to speak fast. And typically when we say fluency, we're talking about how we speak the language. He speaks fluently, we say. We don't say he listens fluently or he reads. We may say he reads fluently, but, oh, I hear no sound? Okay. All right. So, fluently. So in French, for example, they say couramment, like a current. A current, again, that's flowing. All right. I hear a number of people seem to be complaining they have no sounds. I guess the moderator should deal with that. In Italian it's correntemente, but in say Spanish it's con fluidez, or in Chinese it's also the sense of something flowing, liu li, or ryucho in Japanese. In Russian, of course, they say svobodna, which freely, or vilno in Ukrainian. So the idea of fluency is not that it's perfect or that you sound like a native. All it means is that it flows. It flows comfortably, freely. You're comfortable speaking. Person listening to you, Beglo, is comfortable. You're comfortable speaking. The person listening to you is comfortable listening. So, what has happened in this world, and I have my t-shirt from the Montreal Long Fest, and there's more and more of these get-togethers where people who are interested in languages connect at conferences, connect at meetings such as this one. And so this is a world that I have discovered in the last 10 years. I learned my languages throughout my professional career, initially as a diplomat with the Canadian government, and then as a businessman, and languages were very useful to me. My Chinese was useful, my Japanese was useful, my French, my Swedish, my Spanish. A number of languages were useful to me, so I learned them for a variety of reasons. I lived in Japan, so I learned Japanese, obviously. And of course, it brings you so much, because I am able to travel the world, to connect with people. If I'm sitting beside someone in an airplane, there's a very good chance that I understand and I can communicate in their language. It's a wonderful feeling. I don't know how many times. Today, for example, I was visiting Jaffa, and there were a group of Chinese there, and they were speaking Cantonese. So I spoke to them in Cantonese, and they were so delighted. And of course, I have to admit that I enjoy doing this. And then I spoke to them they said, "Where did you learn?" And I said, "Well, I was in Hong Kong and I learned Mandarin in Hong Kong." And then they spoke to me in Mandarin. So then I spoke to them in Mandarin. And of course, they were even more impressed, because many of them don't speak Mandarin very well. But all of these things are fun to do. But of course, learning languages is a lot more than just being able to impress someone in a casual conversation like this. And let me just go on. And of course, most of my career I was involved in the lumber trade. I was in business. So languages to me were simply a tool. But in the last 10 years, because of my involvement with Link, my YouTube channel, I wrote a book. So I've sort of become engaged in this polyglot community. But and that has given me a different perspective, and that's what I want to share with you today. A different perspective from when I was simply a businessman who needed languages for my business. So one of the important issues that comes up all the time in the polyglot world is, do we focus on input or do we focus on output? And I think many of you are aware of the sort of discussion of speak from the beginning or don't speak from the beginning or silent period and all of these things. And I think it's a matter of what you need, Like I'm here in Israel, everything is written in Hebrew, of course. If I go to buy something in a convenience store, the person's going to address me in Hebrew. As if, which of course is natural. Why shouldn't they so address me in Hebrew? And I can't speak Hebrew. I would love to be able to say a few things in Hebrew. So in my situation here, I have a need to speak right away. But most of my languages, which I learned, especially over the last 10, 12 years, I don't have the opportunity to speak a lot. But I do have the opportunity to build up my capability, to build up my potential, and to enjoy the language in so many different ways. For example, in reading novels or in following podcasts. And I will explain to you why I think that there is no contradiction between input or output. I think it's perfectly legitimate to focus on input if you're not in a situation where you need to output. And through intensive input activities, you will build up your capability to become fluent. And that's the ultimate goal, fluency, speaking fluently. But intensive input work provides you with the vocabulary, provides you with the familiarity, provides you with all the things you need in order to be able to become genuinely fluent. And to simply be able to go to a convenience store and buy some grapes, which is what my immediate need would be here in Tel Aviv, that's not fluency. That's not fluency. So, we'll press on here. And I am a great believer in the ideas of Stephen Krashen. I'm sure the print is too small and you can't read all of this, but Stephen Krashen says, language acquisition does not require extensive use of conscious grammatical rules and does not require tedious drill. All right? When I buy, and I do buy books on language learning, I never ever do the drills and exercises. Never. And in fact, I was in a bookstore here looking for books on learning Hebrew, and the more drills and exercises, the less I wanted to buy the book. I don't want to spend $30 for a book when it's 70% drills and exercises or irrelevant explanation. I just need, here's how the language works, here's 2 or 3 examples, and that's all I want. Because most of my learning is going to come through input. As Stephen Krashen says, acquisition requires meaningful interaction in the target language, natural communication, meaningful, all right, in which speakers are concerned not with the form of their utterance, but with the message. So in other words, whether we're reading, I'm not analyzing the grammar of something that I'm reading, I'm trying to get the meaning of that. And when I'm speaking, I'm trying to communicate meaning. I'm not so concerned about how accurately I speak. Because with enough exposure, with enough input, and eventually output and communication, gradually your brain is going to start to form some patterns that will enable you to speak the language better and better. And we learn to speak accurately and correctly from the input, so that, and then the correct output is not something that you can teach up front. The correct output is going to come after considerable input, and I firmly believe, and I agree with Dr. Krashen, who's a wonderful speaker, by the way. I wanted to add one other thing, you know. Are we ever too old to learn? I have a picture here of these London taxi cabs. Apparently, the London taxi drivers, they have to take a course and they have to study books on all the streets in London. When in doing so, that portion of their brain, which is involved in processing this kind of information, grows larger, is larger than this sort of center of other people's brains. But these taxi drivers are not 5 years old. It's not as if after the age of 5 or after the age of 11, your brain will no longer create new neural connections to enable it to learn new things. These taxi drivers are typically 25 years old and they learn. And so, and certainly in my own experience, I don't think that I'm any worse a language learner today than I was when I was 17. My most recent experience is with Greek. And I feel that I'm learning very quickly. I've been studying Greek for 6 months, you know, a few hours a day, sitting in the car listening and so forth. And I'm now listening to a podcast about the building of the Acropolis, which I paid to have transcribed. So I have the text, I study it at length. I mean, after 6 months of a couple of hours a day, I'm dealing with serious historical material, in other words, podcast and the transcript about history in Greek. I don't think I was able to do that when I was 16 or 17 years old. Now, part of that, of course, is that we have so much better technology now, so many facilities on the internet to find things of interest and so forth. So, age has nothing to do with it. I'm a better language learner today than 50 years ago. And I think the key is that we have an open mind and that we notice things. We have to notice the pronunciation. I don't think the key necessarily is, I don't necessarily want my pronunciation to be corrected. And I'll give an example. For example, Russian. When I first started in Russian, that's about 10 years ago, and I was listening to Russian and I started speaking, and I was on an internet forum. I can't remember the name of it, you know, how to speak any language or something like that. And so I put up an audio recording of me pronouncing Russian. And of course I got criticized and you're no good and stuff. And I wasn't. But I hadn't listened to enough. I hadn't noticed enough. And I think for us to pronounce something accurately, we have to hear it. If we can't hear it, we can't pronounce it. And when you start with a language, you just don't notice so many things. You don't hear the pronunciation. And therefore, it's easier, in my opinion, to work on your pronunciation after 3 months. After you have given your brain a chance to listen to it and you start noticing little things, you know, you start noticing, for example, in Russian, okay, you're going to see svoboda. You might think it's svoboda, but they don't say svoboda, they say svaboda. And these are things that you start to notice after a while. And once you notice them, then you have a chance of pronouncing them correctly. So it's very important. And I think with enough exposure, we start to notice. There's a bit of a debate, you know, do we need to deliberately notice? To some extent, we're going to notice simply by being exposed to the language. If you walk in the forest often enough, you're going to start noticing a plant that you didn't see before. But you have to want to notice. If you walk through the forest, you know, with your nose in your iPhone, text messaging your friend, you're not going to notice anything. So it's important in language learning that we are open to the new language. We are looking to see how the new language works. We're curious about the language. Then we notice things. But it is still possible that, you know, other things we simply don't notice. And that's where a teacher can help. That's where sometimes error correction can help. So there are a number of things that can help, but most of the things that we notice and most of the things that we learn and the corrections that we make, we're going to notice them ourselves, and we're going to correct ourselves. And the better our ability to notice, the more curious we are to notice, the more things we're going to notice. And the more things we notice, the better we're going to learn. So noticing, having an attitude that you want to learn about the language. How does it work? How do they pronounce? You're alert to the language, and as you get, and of course the thing about noticing is it's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. At first there's no picture there, but as you start to put more of the pieces together, all of a sudden you start to see where the other pieces fit in. And it's the same with noticing. You notice certain very obvious things right away, and then after a while you start to notice things that weren't so obvious at first. And with enough exposure, with enough input, you notice better and better. Now, however, you notice things, but unfortunately, all the things that we notice and we think we learn, we forget them. And this is one of the fundamental principles of language learning. And I think one of the things that makes good language learners good and better than not so good language learners. And that is, I don't get upset at the fact that I keep on forgetting. I have looked at that Hebrew alphabet, I don't know how many times. I've read stuff on Link in Hebrew, and I wander around Tel Aviv and I look at the signs on the buildings, and I can never get the letter. What was that again? Was that the B, Sv, G? I keep confusing the letters. It just takes time. And so we learn things, we've all had the experience that we look up a word in the dictionary, and no sooner have we, our eyes have moved away from the dictionary, and we have already forgotten what was in the dictionary. We've already forgotten. So forgetting, getting it wrong, so forth, is a part of language learning. It shouldn't be a cause of frustration. And the good thing is that according to research, if we learn something and then forget it and relearn it, that creates a stronger neural connection, a stronger connection between our neurons. It's good to forget and relearn and forget again and relearn. That's going to give us a better long-term memory. Therefore, forgetting is good. And so it shouldn't be a source of frustration. Now, I'm going to ignore these questions for now, and I will look at them at the end of the presentation. And I'm happy to look at questions in languages other than English, by the way. And if you want me to answer in a language other than English, I'm prepared to do that as well. So, and I love this image because I used this image in another presentation. It's the upside down hockey stick. And in the original presentation, I had the Montreal Canadiens logo and the Vancouver Canucks, because I was speaking in Montreal, and of course, I live in Vancouver. But I thought, this is a more international audience, so I went out and got the logo of the Central Army hockey team in Russia, who I gather won the championship in the KHL. Whatever it's called, Centralna Zborna Krasnaya Army. At any rate, the key thing here is the hockey stick. When we start in a language, we have a very steep climb at first. It's very difficult, but we have this sense that we are achieving something because we knew nothing, we didn't understand anything, and all of a sudden we know something, a little bit. We're able to say something, we're able to understand something. And that can last for 2-3 months. It's a period where we're dealing with learner material, and we have a sense of achievement. And of course the brain likes achievement. Even if you're struggling but you feel that you've actually achieved something, That's very satisfying. But then comes this very long period, the sort of the shaft of the hockey stick. And there we have the sense that we're not getting anywhere. We don't notice our improvement. It seems that there's an endless number of words that we have to learn. And that is, and so it can sometimes be a little bit frustrating. But that's why I have the picture of the cross-country skier. Because we have to learn to enjoy that shaft portion, the long portion, where we are learning more words, gradually getting more used to the language, and it seems at times as if we're not making progress. But that's where it's very important to enjoy what we're doing. And I, for example, when I was learning Russian, I did a lot of cross-country skiing. And I can still remember myself skiing through this forest. It's 15 below 0 centigrade. And I'm skiing and I'm listening to an audiobook of Kuprin, Yama. Or was that Kuprin? Yeah, I think it was. So, and I'm skiing and listening to this audiobook. And it's a wonderful way. So I'm enjoying it. I'm not worried about if I listen to this for 2 hours while skiing, how much am I improving? It doesn't matter. I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying the language. All right? So we have to get up that very steep part. Or if you think in terms of cross-country skiing, very often, okay, you're climbing up the steep part, but then you get to that plateau and you just keep going. But you have to keep going because we don't notice our improvement, but eventually we do. As long as you keep feeding the brain, it is going to learn the language. So, getting back to this idea of output, I'm not a big fan of artificial conversation, role-playing. I had a Greek tutor on italki, and she said, okay, today we're going to do role-playing. Let's pretend that you're going through customs in Greek. Well, first of all, I can't remember the last time I was stopped going through customs. Customs officials don't stop you anymore. You just go through. So that's not a very realistic situation. Second of all, if I am stopped by the customs official in Athens, I'm sure not going to speak Greek to him. I'm going to speak English to him. So a lot of the role-playing situations, to my mind, are unnecessarily artificial. It's enough to have conversations about things of interest and talk when you feel like it. So I don't like role-playing and a lot of the sort of artificial types of activities that are, I would say, traditional in classrooms, along with these grammar drills and things of that nature. I don't think it's necessary. If you have enough input, the brain will eventually get used to the language. I know there are people who enjoy flashcards. I don't do them very much. I use flashcards at the beginning because it's at the very beginning it's difficult for me to deal with sort of meaningful context. I have too much trouble, say in Hebrew right now, I have too much trouble reading even a simple story, whereas if I can go through the flashcards, at least it's giving me something. It's giving me some exposure and giving me a bit of a toehold on the language. But the idea thereafter, as I start accumulating more and more words, the idea that I would spend half an hour or an hour a day going through flashcards, I couldn't possibly do it. In my Greek, for example, in 6 months, I have learned over 7,000 words, and I have created 20,000 links. In other words, in our system, in Link, I have saved 20,000 words and phrases. These are words and phrases that I'm in the process of learning. They haven't yet become known. I only have 7,000 that are known, but 20,000 I have looked up. But I can't possibly review 20,000 of them in flashcards because then I would have no time left for my reading and listening, which is what I find enjoyable. But these are all things that It's a matter of what people want to do and what they enjoy doing. I'm just going to share with you what I do. So the same with grammar. You know, you often hear people say, you know, you have to learn the basics of grammar. I have never been able to learn the basics of grammar because until I have enough experience with the language, the grammar explanations don't make a lot of sense. Sometimes I don't even believe them. I don't understand what they're referring to. I learn them and I forget them. It's like studying the word, you know, the noun, the declensions, the endings in German or Slavic languages. You can't. You think you learned something and today and you can remember it for an hour and tomorrow it's gone. So grammar is not a matter of building blocks. Grammar is something that is there briefly and then it goes away and then it comes back and then it goes away. So you constantly have to refer to your grammar. And that's easy to do today because you just Google, what's the conjugation of the French verb such and such? You just Google. So the idea that you're going to sort of lock in some kind of basic knowledge of grammar, to me is unrealistic. You can get an overview. And I buy grammar books or language books that have a brief explanation, the essence of how the grammar works in this language. I read it through, picking up a few things each time. I go back to it and I go back to it, but I never think that I'm going to learn something. Now I will study the conjugation table of this verb and now I know the verb. It's not going to happen. You'll see it here, you'll see it there, you'll see it somewhere else, and eventually you'll get in the habit of using it correctly. That's the same with the declensions in Slavic languages. I think the idea that you're going to teach grammar up front, grammar is part of what you'll gradually get used to. And referring to the grammar book is one way to help you notice. You know, and I always use this example, like in Russian or in a Slavic language, you know, 1 год, okay, 1 year. 2, 3, 4 года, okay, but 5 лет. That is, when you first come across that rule, you would probably read it and you wouldn't believe it. Like my first reaction was, that can't possibly be. However, if you have already seen that in action through your reading and listening, and you go, oh yeah, okay, then it tends to stick. So I think the grammar learning is something that we're constantly working on, but it's certainly not a basic building block that we can sock in at the beginning. At least I can't. Some people maybe can. So one of the things that I've done at Link and for my own learning is to create these mini stories where each story consists of 3 parts. The first story told by, Steve went to the bookstore and bought a book, and there's a bunch of stuff that happens. And then the same story as told by Steve. So it's the same basic vocabulary, but with a few changes. And then questions. And in the questions, I think it's very important that in questions, when you ask someone about something they have just read or listened to, that the answer is provided in the question. In other words, Steve went to the bookstore. Then the question is, did Steve go to the pharmacy? And the answer is, no, Steve went to the bookstore. So that you have the answer right there. I've always resented questions. If I read a story, then they started asking me, why did this and that? And I have to try to remember the story. And I'm forcing my brain to do things that are not related to language learning. So that when we are presented with these questions, it should merely be an opportunity to repeat the vocabulary that we've been listening to in the story. So we have had these many stories. We have 60 of them translated into a lot of these languages. I have used them now. We have a very good version of them in Ukrainian. We have them in Russian. I use them for Slovak. I use them for Greek. I use them for Hebrew. And they are available at Link. And, here's one, Misho je kuchar, toto je príbeh o Mishovi, ktorý je kuchar, blah, 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 blah. And there's the story at Link. And then the same story, the questions. misho pije kavu, misho pije kavu, pije misho chai, ne, misho ne pije chai, pije kavu, and so forth. And I very much recommend that people get into these stories if they're at an early stage in their learning. Because once you get past that early stage, again, some of you who may not be familiar with Link, you have an opportunity to save words, to save phrases, and you learn these, and there's a variety of ways in which the system helps you accumulate vocabulary and become more familiar with a language. However, you have to eventually progress beyond these simple stories, because the simple stories are in here. They're in the very sharp blade portion of the hockey stick. But if you want to progress in this longer journey where you're skiing along, you're gliding, you're enjoying, but you're not conscious of improving, then it's very important that you get into things of interest. And I mean, I've only put a few examples here. There are so many resources, like this Akunin, History of Russia. This LitRes is a website in Russia that has an app, and I regularly get notifications of their latest publications and stuff, audio and text. It's a limitless resource. The same is true for every language that I've studied, including Greek now, Czech, Romanian, there's just limitless stuff available. Once you're past the early stage, we have a lot of content in our library at Link, but I typically will go out and buy something. I'll pay €20 for a good ebook and audiobook. I use Calibre, which is Calibre, which is a tremendous piece of software. It's basically free, but you give them a contribution every now and again. And you can convert any format into a text file. And if it's a text file, you can import it into Link and use it on Link. So we live today in a world where not only do we have, I'm prejudiced, but a wonderful resource like Link for language learning. You have italki, which I mentioned earlier. You have many other resources that are out there, systems. You have online dictionaries. Google Translate. Some people complain about Google Translate. In fact, Google Translate is so useful in so many different ways. You have the text-to-speech. When I study at Link, for example, every word or phrase that I save, I hear it. So here I am with Hebrew struggling, but I can immediately hear each little word pronounced in text-to-speech. I couldn't possibly listen to the whole story in text-to-speech. I need a human voice if I'm going to listen for a whole lesson. But for one word or one phrase, the text-to-speech is wonderful. And then the resources, in Czech, in Russian, and Ukrainian, ebooks, audiobooks, radio programs, podcasts. There's so much stuff out there that no comparison that the environment for language learning today is so much better than it was 50 years ago when I learned Chinese, for example. So, let's see, what else do we have? So yeah, I think getting back to this idea of fluency, in order to be comfortable, there was a presentation at one of the Polyglot conferences where someone suggested that we could be fluent with 200 words. You can be fluent with 200 words or you can be fluent at 10,000 words. I don't believe that. I don't believe that because fluent means comfortable, means a conversation. And it's kind of meaningless to be able to say a few things and not understand what the person is saying back at you. I think we need a lot of words. If I look at my list here, I did this, at a time when I only had 3,000 words in Greek. I'm now at 7,000. But, 54,000 words of Ukrainian, 63,000 words of Czech, and 33,000 in Polish, and so on and so forth. These are the languages that I've studied here at Link. You need a lot of words. You need a lot of words because in order to develop that fluency, you have to be able to read and maybe even read novels and read books and to understand movies in order to get some kind of a background in the culture so that when you're communicating with people, you understand a little bit about their background and their culture. So I'm a believer in a lot of emphasis on input. So many tools out there. There's so many tools to help us look some, point of grammar up. That grammar, I should have actually put this slide in a bit earlier. Grammar is something that you discover when you need it. And curiosity is so important. You have to be curious about the language, about the people. You have to want to learn the language. You have to like the people, or some of them. You have to like some aspect of their culture. You have to want to learn about them. And similar with grammar. You have to be curious. If you're curious, there's a greater likelihood that you'll learn. And so, as I close this out, I think the key in all of this is attitude. So, curious about the language. I like the language. I'm confident that I can do it. I'm confident that the method that I'm using is good, is the right one for me. So we have to have all those attitudes. We have to put in the time. It takes time to learn a language, lots of time. And I mentioned noticing. We have to develop that ability to notice. And ultimately, to speak well, to speak fluently, you have to speak a lot. Even though I emphasize input, but my emphasis on input is with a purpose. I want to get to where I can speak. I want to get to a level where I understand what people are saying. And if I go to someone's home and there's 3 or 4 people there and they're all speaking, Russian or French or Chinese, I want to be able to participate in that conversation. I want to understand what they're saying. So once I build up my level now to where I can understand, in order to speak well, I have to speak a lot. And that's why if someone is, let's say someone lives in Russia and they're unhappy about their level of English, and it doesn't have to be Russia, it can be anywhere, France or China, and they say, gee, I wish I could speak better. But realistically, until you are in an immersion environment, until you're in a situation where you can speak a lot, you can go out 3 times a week with friends and speak the language, it's not realistic to expect that you're going to speak so tremendously well. So people shouldn't be too demanding or critical of themselves. If they develop their passive capability and they have the vocabulary and they have the comprehension, when they go to speak, they're going to make mistakes. If I had to worry every time I spoke as to whether, is it this case or that case, or am I going to get it right or wrong, I just speak. I just let myself go, because the more I speak, the better I will get. So I have to be relaxed and just let myself go, be confident that all the work that I put into building up my passive knowledge, my vocabulary, my familiarity with the language, it's all going to be activated. And so when I go and speak, and obviously you want to speak as much as you can, just enjoy it and realize that you will gradually improve, especially if you notice. And very often we notice the mistakes we made after the fact. That's why it's a good idea to make a video. Very often when I make videos in other languages and I look at those videos, I see the mistakes that I made. And I may make the same mistake again and again. But eventually, gradually, I will improve. So perhaps I could end it there. And I'd be happy to answer questions. And I just encourage you to put as much effort as possible into your input activities and take advantage of every opportunity to speak, and to speak without worrying about how well you're performing, because the speaking is just all about communicating. So I'll just stop it here and look forward to answering questions. Now, so do I go back to the top of the list here? And, okay. Sorry. So does a moderator come in at this point, or do I just answer the questions as I see them? I am so happy to see. Oh, okay, here's a question. What do I talk about with my language tutors? I would say the biggest subject is politics and history, because that's what interests me. So, yeah, and I do so limited, but, you know, the important thing is to have a tutor who is a good conversationalist. Not necessarily someone who's going to teach me grammar. Sometimes I get a tutor that says, okay, today we're going to do numbers, or today we're going to do colors. And I say, no, we're not. We're just going to talk. But it's sometimes up to the tutor to probe and find those areas of common interest. In the case of Greek again, because I'm listening to this podcast about the Acropolis, we talked a bit about that. I talked about the crisis, economic crisis in Greece, unemployment, things of that nature. But it's important that the tutor be encouraging. Like, if I pronounce the word wrong and the tutor goes, huh? You know, that's not very nice. I sometimes get that. I don't like that. I don't go back to those tutors. I go to tutors that are encouraging and are able to keep the conversation going. All right. Как вы думаете, обязательно ли заниматься, where did that go? И можно достигнуть свободного говорения самому. So, но я буду ответить по-английски, okay? Потому что там, я думаю, что много людей не понимают русский. So, do you have to have a teacher? I think, you know, all of these things, do you have to have? It's nice to have a teacher. It's nice to have a teacher. Teachers are a valuable resource, and they're expensive, especially if it's a one-on-one. I'm not a big fan of sitting in a classroom, so it would be a one-on-one. So you have to use them intelligently. You have to use a teacher intelligently. So if I have 3 sessions a week, first of all, I would not engage with a tutor online until I have at least 3,000-4,000 words. I noticed that in Greek, when I reached 3,000 words, I decided, okay, now I'm going to start speaking. I know that with Czech, I waited even longer before I started speaking. Russian, I went for 6 months before I started speaking, because I want to have some words. I want to be able to understand. But once you have a tutor, I think 3 times a week is plenty. 3 hours a week is plenty, because there's so much that you have to do on your own. Okay. Now, let's see, what else? My idea is to learn the conjugation and then just to create sentences as quickly as possible. That I am not capable of doing. I actually got killed by it. I make flashcards by our written assessment works were corrected by word and we practice. So I'm looking for questions here. How do you learn pronunciation? All right. Pronunciation. First of all, there is a great tendency to want to pronounce the way we pronounce in our own language. All right? Including giving the letters in the new language the values that they have in the languages we're familiar with. So, as I mentioned earlier, it takes a while in Russian to realize that the O, where the emphasis isn't on that syllable, the O becomes an A. You don't notice that at first. So you have to really pay attention to how the language is spoken and matching, and I caught the end of Kerstin's presentation, matching the writing system to pronunciation. So you have to really build that relationship. Not always possible. For example, in Chinese, it's not the case. They're not a phonetic script. But I tend to work a lot with listening. And then, you know, I learn languages for my own pleasure, so I'm not too concerned about my pronunciation. But if I were, I would say that I would put a lot of emphasis on intonation and rhythm. And if you get the rhythm and the intonation right, a lot of the other stuff will fall into place. So I would listen to a short paragraph, read the same time, then, so in other words, if I have, like in Link, if I have a short paragraph, I read the paragraph, then I listen to it, then I turn off the sound, and then I try to say that paragraph again myself, following the same rhythm and intonation as the native speaker. And then I listen to the native speaker again. But a major emphasis on intonation. And if the intonation is there, very often the vowel sounds and so forth will come along. So I think a major emphasis initially on intonation, on listening for it, and reading, and then hearing it, and then trying to read along, not just one word at a time, but a phrase or a sentence at a time, or even a short paragraph. Okay, here's a question. How could I use Link to coach my two friends? Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. Everyone is individual. One thing about Link is that people have to be curious, people have to be interested, they have to find content of interest to themselves, they have to be prepared. Like, people say to me, oh, well, you must be very good at languages, you're a genius and stuff. So I look at my Greek, which is my most recent language, okay? I'm going by memory here, but I think in the last 5-6 months, when I last looked, I had read 120,000 words, okay? That's almost 2 books worth of reading. I had listened to 60-70 hours. So if anybody is going to use Link, they have to really apply themselves. It's like any method. It doesn't matter which method, you have to put the time in. And so I think that would be my main suggestion. If you're going to get people on Link, make sure that they do a lot of listening and reading and creating links, as we say, saving words and phrases. Here's one. How do you get used to a different word order? You just get used to it. I mean, the word order, by the way, you mentioned, I don't know Uzbek, but you say Cantonese. I mean, the word order in Cantonese is not that bad. Word order in Japanese is much more different. I don't worry about those individual ideas like word order and stuff like that. If you basically allow yourself to get used to the language, you get used to the word order. It's a game. It's fun to try to say things the way they say it, without questioning, without wondering, without trying to position the verb where we would put it in English or in our native language, and just kind of saying, hey, this is how they say things, especially in phrases, and just going with the flow. The different word order has never bothered me. So Steve san ga itteru no ni koto ni daisansei desu kara ureshii desu. Okay, what if I want to learn 2 languages? Oh, teishimeza solution. Okay. 2 languages. Okay, I am not a big fan of learning 2 languages at the same time because I'm here in Israel and Greece. I initially thought I would learn a bit of both, and you can't. I just find that it takes so much commitment and dedication, in my own experience. If you're starting 2 languages from scratch, that is very difficult. It doesn't harm you. I think it's good for the brain in some ways. I've always felt that if I go away from a language and come back to it, I actually improve. No question that forcing yourself to learn another language is good for your language learning capability. However, I do believe that you have to focus. So right now I'm focusing more on Greek, although while in Israel here, I am all of a sudden back to trying to do some Hebrew, but I find it difficult. You can maintain you can maintain a language, but to go from scratch into would be difficult. What was the site resource you mentioned for finding ebooks, audiobooks in your talk? Okay, in Romanian, I went to Radio Romania, which is a radio station there, and they have podcasts, and I had someone transcribe them for me. Which language? I mean, again, in Czech, this Český rozhlas has some great stuff. You just have to look. What I typically do, is I'll if I don't know how to say, you know, ebook in history in whatever Polish, then I'll just get the Google Translate. And the case of Polish is publio.pl, where they've got, I bought several ebooks and audiobooks there. You have to Google to find this stuff for the language that you're interested in. I can't recommend a German grammar, but German grammar. Yes, I was in a bookstore, Collins has put out a very short, because grammar books, the shorter the better, the simpler the better. And Collins has put out a new German grammar book. I thought it was really good. Okay, j'ai dans le système d'écriture néerlandais jusqu'à maintenant, je n'ai su parler qu'à 18 ans après avoir été tout ça. Yeah. Okay, wie oft sprichst du mit deinen Lehrern? Yeah, 2-3 times a week, I said, is how often I would speak with but only after I have achieved a certain level. Okay, some sites for Hebrew. We have Hebrew at Link, which I'm using. And I also bought a colloquial book for Hebrew when I was in London, and they have audio available on their website. And in fact, if you go to the colloquial website, you can download their audio files free of charge. How do you maintain your languages? I don't lose them. They kind of slide a bit, but if I spend a day or two at Link listening to stuff and reading, they tend to come back. I don't worry about it. If they slip, they slip. And next time I go to speak, it'll come back. It's not something that I worry about. So you do not speak at all at the beginning? No, I do not speak at all at the beginning. I have nothing to say. I don't understand anything. Would you give more priority to listening, talking, or conversation? Okay. Listening is by far the easiest to do. Listening is something I can do when I'm walking, when I'm doing the dishes, when I'm in the car. So inevitably, listening is about 70% of my language learning. But if I listen and I don't understand, that's frustrating. So then I read. And I read the same material. I always listen and read to the same stuff. Read the same stuff as I'm listening to. And then work it at Link. And then only after I have call it a B2, would I consider starting to speak to anyone. I admire your method, but I can't cope with translating a new language I learned to my native one, and it's my problem. Okay, well, inevitably you're going to translate. You're going to translate individual words. But then you go back and you read it again. That's why, again, with these mini stories, because at Link you can actually create playlists. So I can see how many times I've listened to these stories. I've listened to some of them 30, 40, 50 times. Okay, the same silly little story, which has a lot of repeating vocabulary. I did this for Greek, for example. And so the vocabulary repeats a lot. And I've listened to the story 50 times. And there's 60 of these stories. So at some point, I'm no longer translating. This stuff has been, and I've read it more than once, lots of times. And at the beginning level, I've also reviewed the vocabulary in flashcards. And then I'm listening 30, 40, 50 times. So that starts to become living language in my head. That's no longer translation. That's phrases that just come out because I've trained my brain now to hear it so often. Okay. How to maintain. So, yeah, in what language? I think, depends on the language, but I don't even ask myself the question. Because obviously the languages that I speak very fluently, like French or Japanese or Mandarin, it's just coming out. Languages that I don't speak so well, I'm sometimes structuring it a bit in English, so it's a bit of a mixture. And then if I don't speak well at all, then I rely even more on translating. So there's no rule, but I don't think about it. I let the language come out, sometimes more and sometimes with more difficulty. How do you learn untranslatable words and use them in context? Well, I don't think there are such things as untranslatable words. There are words that might require more words to translate, but first of all, if I'm not translating for someone, don't worry about it. I just, again, when we read something in another language, whatever meaning we derive from that, that's ours. So if it's not correct, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to be tested on it. So if there's something there that I got wrong, that doesn't really matter. If I'm enjoying it, I'm reading about the Acropolis in Greece, and there's all kinds of stuff I don't quite understand what they're saying, but it's still enjoyable. I'm still visualizing these guys 2,500 years ago, building the Acropolis, and it's enjoyable. And as I'm exposing myself to the language, my ability is improving, and I'm learning more words. And so if there's some things there that are either untranslatable or I don't understand them, it's not a problem. All right. Now, what else? How much time does it take to reach C2 from B2 in English? I don't know. But I'll tell you, I think the biggest distance is from B1 to B2. Because that's, and of course, all of these levels are not cast in stone. They're not, something that you can measure on a scale, right? But typically, to my mind, sort of that lower intermediate level, where you're still struggling and a lot of stuff you don't understand, but you can kind of almost make conversation. Whereas B2, you've got to be very good. Like B2 is fluent. So the biggest time, to my mind, in my experience, is getting from B1 to B2. All right. Now, let's see. Any other, what do we got here? What level do you stop learning to begin studying a new language? Oh, yeah. When I enjoy exploring languages. I would love to go back and be better at some of the languages that I already speak. And yet the temptation is to learn a little bit about some other language. It's just, you're at a big feast and you would like to try some of this and try some of that. So it depends. It's a matter of my mood. It's a matter of where I'm going to go. Like, how do you choose the next language to be learned? Well, I decided we're going to go to Israel and Greece, so that decided that I'm going to learn those languages. I also would like to learn more about this part of the world, like the Middle East. So next year I'd like to learn Arabic and Farsi. And, it can be a simple thing. Like, I was in Vancouver at a store and there's a gentleman there. And he's originally from Iran and he was very nice and we were having a great conversation. And so that's motivating to me. It said, yeah, it wouldn't be fun to learn Farsi. So how do you allocate your time between 8 and 9 languages that you learn? Okay, I don't spend much time on the languages that I already have. I might, I subscribe to certain podcasts in Ukrainian or from Brazil and stuff. I might listen to the odd one, but most of the time is focused on the languages that I'm learning. Right now, Greek, for example, or while I'm here in Israel, Hebrew. Do I know Turkish? No, but it's on my list. Have you been to all the countries? Is it an obligatory step in the process of learning to go to the country where the language is spoken? It's not obligatory, but it's the reward, and I think it's one should prepare as much as possible so that when you get to the country, you're able to say something. Like here I am in Israel, I can't do anything in Hebrew. It's a bit frustrating. Whereas my Greek is much better. When I get to Greece, I'll be able to operate in Greece, and I'll be able to derive, my Greek will improve. It'll be, I'll be able to take advantage of being there. But it's not obligatory. I was in China giving lectures, and some of the students at the universities there, they spoke 3, 4, 5 languages, and they were very fluent. And I'm sure if I go to other countries and you have people who are totally committed to language learning, they're learning. I learned Mandarin to quite a fluent level in Hong Kong 40-some years ago, and it was not a Mandarin-speaking city. Certainly in those days, no one spoke Mandarin. What about my Polish? It's let us say, very difficult right now. I understand it, but to try to speak it would be very difficult. Jak wykorzystać efektywnie pobyt za granicą? Yeah, how do the problem with the Polish now is, having been in Bratislava, having learned Ukrainian, my Polish is kind of lost in the weeds there. But if I were to spend any time on it, I could bring it back pretty quickly. The imitation method, I'm not quite sure what the imitation method is, but imitation is fundamental. We are not only imitating the language, we are imitating some of the cultural behavior of people of another group. So imitating is absolutely important. Okay. All right. I think I'm nearing the end here. I think it's time for the next speaker. So thank you very much for listening. And please have a look at link.
a lovely presentation. I don't want to interrupt you, but unfortunately we have to invite the next.
Yes, invite me, Paul, I'm coming.
Thank you, Steve. But if you guys want to...
Yep.
Yes, I think there is an echo as well. Yes, and if you guys want to find Steve, you can also find him on YouTube. This is the link of his YouTube channel. You can also find him on link.com. You also have here the link. And but now it's time for our next speaker. Our next speaker, Elisa Polese. Elisa, are you there? Are you ready? And I would also like to remind you guys that if you didn't have time to watch all presentations, but you'd like to watch all presentations, you can access linguahackers.com record. I'd like to say hello. Elisa Polese is a professor. I tried to teach 5 languages at the same time. It was an experiment, but you can do it in 10, right? So I'm very much looking forward to this presentation. I think we have a very similar philosophy on language learning. So without further ado, Elisa Polese, I will...
Thank you.
Thank you. My mic.
Haben ganz viele Vorteile. Man lernt die Sprache.
Hello, good evening, everyone.
Man kann sich
Today's topic is how to learn many languages at the same time and how to teach up to 10 languages in one course. My name is Elisa. I teach 13 languages and I've studied many more. I'm a professional teacher and I've taught online at universities and in language schools.
Kann sich auch besser Sachen merken. Es kommt
Okay. So I hope you can see my slides. Okay. So what we are going to talk about. First of all, how it works. So language combinations, type of students, lesson structure, and course material and learning activities. Then we're going to talk about the advantages of this method, for whom it works, and advantages for both teachers and students. And I'm going to show you some lesson clips and give you some practical examples. And I'm going to show you 2 short interviews about this method. Okay, I think some of you are wondering whether it's really possible to learn or teach many languages at the same time. I really think it's possible. First of all, I do it all the time for myself, and I've been teaching many languages at the same time, and all my students do it with excellent results. You will also see that. Okay. So, and I really think it works not only for polyglots, because actually most of my students are not polyglots. If you have studied already many languages at the same time, you might have noticed already similarities between languages. And actually there are always similarities, even if the languages are not, they not belong to the same family. What happens in multilingual courses is that I or the students, we constantly compare languages and switch from one language to the other. So why I think it's a really great method? First of all, is because you will not mix up languages. I think that many of you might have tried to learn two different languages which were quite similar, and then thinking, oh, okay, I want to speak, I don't know, Spanish, but I can think only of Italian words, and if you learn them in a certain way, and if you learn them in simultaneous, like in a parallel way, then you will not mix them up. And the second very good reason is that you can learn much faster. Why?
you can learn much faster, because actually many things are similar, at least in the structure, from one language to the other, and really not only in languages which belong to the same family. And so you don't need to go through the same process over and over again. I will show you a bit more of that later. And apart from higher mental flexibility and many other things, of course, you can know many languages, and if you don't need 5 years to reach a certain level in a language, or 2 years or 1 year, and then add another language, of course, you will also enhance your job opportunities. Okay. So as I said, by concentrating on differences, you can learn much faster, you cannot mix them up. When I say that you can learn them simultaneously, means that, for example, if you normally, let's say that it takes you 1 year or more, 2 or 3, depends. At school it takes much longer to learn a certain language. If you don't have to start the process over and over again, you can reduce this time and learn much faster. So what I say is that it's possible to learn in the same time you would learn like 1 language to learn 5. Of course, if you would normally dedicate 10 minutes a day, which is enough, I think, to learn. Of course, it depends in how long, so in how much time you want to speak fluently. But what I mean is that in the same time you would have learned 1 language, you can learn more. 2, 3, 4, 5, according also to your motivation and to your needs. Of course, it's difficult to learn a language if you're not motivated, if you're not interested. You have to be motivated and interested anyway in those languages. But it's really possible and to do it at the same time with great results. Of course, what I say could be that doesn't fit everyone. So everyone has his own method, his own needs, but in my experience, I never found someone who couldn't learn them simultaneously. And of course, if they don't even open the book, or not even 1 minute every day, of course it's very difficult, but it's not a matter of learning many languages at the same time, it's a matter of learning. So it doesn't matter what you want to learn, at least 5 minutes a day, you should invest 5 minutes a day, so it doesn't matter for what. And if you do so, you will see your results. When I talk about courses, for example, so I give one-to-one classes or group courses, for example. For group courses, of course, there are some limitations. If you're a teacher and you want to offer this type of courses, of course, you should make sure that the students have time to do their homework. I don't believe you have to spend hours doing homework, but of course, they have to have enough time, at least a couple of minutes for each language every day. Especially the beginning, and then in a group, of course, it's difficult to find many people who are interested in the same languages, because if you offer 10 languages in the same course, if I don't know, one person is interested in 3 languages and not in the other 7, they are not going to study. So you do need to find a group which is, at least in terms of interest, quite homogeneous, but then it works very well. Okay, in one-to-one class, of course, you will progress much quicker, but it's, of course, if you're a teacher or if you're a student, just bear in mind that it's, of course, it's more tiring to teach many languages at the same time, and it's very important that you make sure before starting the course that the students are interested in those languages, because I know maybe it seems obvious, but sometimes people are just interested, let's see, but they have to have a kind of motivation to start to study different languages at the same time. Is it possible to do it as online teaching? Yes, it is. It's very important, even more than in normal classes, that you have very good and clear material, because what you have to do as a teacher is to compare them in a very clear way, so that the students have in mind the differences between the languages. And it's difficult if you don't have clear material, then it's very difficult to compare them, because they will not see them like one close to each other. They cannot really compare them, so it's really important. And I personally find it's very useful to have a whiteboard where you can very easily and quickly switch colors, because when you write a word, sometimes students wouldn't know if it's Spanish or Italian. Of course, in some cases it can be clear once if you're not a beginner, but otherwise it's very important that you can, for example, when I'm in a school and I write words on the blackboard, I use different colors for the different languages. Okay, I also would like to show you what people think about those courses. For example, I'm going to show you, it's a very short clip about one of my students who attended a 3-language course or a 10-language course. Okay.
Diese Kurse machen riesen Spaß, haben ganz viele Vorteile, man lernt die Sprache.
Okay. And I'm going to show you,
Hallo. Kannst du uns bitte sagen, was du über mehrsprachigen Kurse
Ja, ich konnte mir das gar nicht vorstellen, oder ob das halt so ein stures Pauken ist. Ja, und wenn wir hier sitzen in der Gruppe, das ist klasse, das ist so, man lernt immer so Stück, man will halt immer reden, man lernt immer so Stück für Stück dazu, was man halt auch anwenden kann.
So, maybe some of you are interested in the lesson structure. So, it depends, of course, where you are teaching. If you have one-to-one class, of course, you can decide with your student. Normally, if it's one-to-one, normally it's 1 hour, sometimes a bit longer, so like between 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, so between 45 minutes and 1 hour and a half, but it depends because as I said, it's more tiring, so cannot be that long if it's one-to-one. In a group, there are different possibilities. For example, if you have 9 minutes because you're teaching in a school and you have 1 hour and a half, then and you're giving a 3-language course. For example, I do like 20 minutes for each language, and then the last 30 minutes I use them to revise, compare, and differentiate the languages. If you have more time, because those classes, when the more languages you have, the longer classes are in schools. It's still 20 minutes per language and 25 minutes, for example, to revise. Okay. Okay. So, and here I show you like the other possible combinations. Of course, you can do the way you think it's appropriate, but it's like between 15 and 20 minutes per language. Only if you have 10 languages, of course, classes cannot be too long, so normally it's like 10 minutes per language. But you will probably think, what? 10 minutes per language? Yes. So you will get results in 10 minutes. There is no doubt. I'll show you a video in a second. The video is of a student who is not a polyglot and had never learned Russian before or any other Slavic language, and I taught him Russian for a very short time, and it was his first lesson, and I recorded the results.
Hallo nochmal. Jetzt Russisch. Как тебя зовут?
Меня зовут Андреас.
Где ты живешь?
Я живу в Тюрихе.
На каких языках ты говоришь?
Я говорю
Vielen Dank. Oh, sehr gut. Vielen Dank. Könntest I'm sorry, I see that for some people the video is not working, but it's so you can find all my videos on the website I wrote in the chat. And I also would like to say that that of course, as I said, the student had learned Russian for the 10 minutes before the recording. So of course, I think it's pretty good anyway. Okay. So, does it work for all the languages? Yes, it does. Of course, if you are teaching or learning languages which belong to the same family, then it's easier to compare. It's much easier for them to pick them up. For example, when I teach, for example, the present tense for Italian, Spanish, French, it takes maybe like 10-15 minutes for the first language, then 10 for the second, and then 5 for the next one. So then understand the sentence of the student, then it goes much quicker. Of course, in a class or with students, you have, so there is constant repetition because you do need to compare the languages, because especially if the students are beginners, they have to have clear in mind what are the features, for example, for Spanish, what are the features for Italian, in order not to mix them up, and to have clear when they speak or when they hear it, what is what. It's very important. And if the languages belong to a different family, there are of course advantages. Like, for example, it's much easier to separate them in the brain because they are they do not look similar, and for the brain it's much easier to differentiate them. But of course, at the beginning it's much more difficult to remember the words. But it's also very important to know that this happens only at the beginning. Only at the beginning, because after you have learned some words, and I never mean by heart, I never learn the words by heart, or I ask students to memorize the words by heart. After you have seen several words, after you have been using them from the very first day, you will remember any other word much quicker than before. Okay. But it's always possible to find a way to compare languages. Doesn't matter if they belong to the same family or not. So, for example, what methods are used when you teach several languages at the same time? So, language switching is one of the most important ones, so that people can really switch languages while talking. What even many polyglots say, so not everyone of course, but many polyglots say, yes, I am very fluent in all the languages, but sometimes it's difficult to switch from one to the other. But if you do it, like, I don't know whether, I can't remember if I said in the beginning, but I'm also studied to be an interpreter, so to switch from one language to the other, and also to interpret simultaneously, then of course it's very, if you switch from one, if you are used to switch from one language to the other, also through practice in class, then it's much easier to do it also in real life. For example, you can ask, how do you say, for example, I work, and then you name 2-3 languages, and then how do you say, for example, for Spanish, French, Catalan, Italian, Portuguese, the word "and" sometimes is a bit, it's not difficult itself, but it's, of course, they have to remember what was that, and these small details are things that you should ask your students at the beginning, so they can really keep separated, they will mix the languages. Okay. So I see that you are still talking about the videos. Anyway, on the website, they work well. Anyway, you can watch them later or whenever you want. They do work. So I hope, I don't know whether it's because you streaming and videos at the same time. If you have any problem, you can write to me later and we can see how I can show you the videos anyway. Okay. And then, for example, if the level is a bit higher, but also not so much, you can say, for example, when the students start asking questions, which is really almost at the beginning, you can say, okay, so you are just asked, for example, what's your name in French? Can you say that in Italian? And can you say that now in Spanish or in Russian or in Portuguese, according to the languages? And, for example, when the level is just a bit higher, when they can talk about the routine, you can say, okay, can you describe what, for example, another student said about the routine, and then can you say that in another language, so they can continuously switch from one language to another. Okay. Now I hope this video that you will be able to see this video. It's I'm going to show you a video of a student who had done some French and Spanish school about 15 years before and had 2 Italian lessons before. The lesson lasted like 10 minutes each for each language, and then we had a conversation, and then at the end you can see how we switch from one language to the other.
Jetzt machen wir so alle 3 Sprachen zusammen. Come si dice? Französisch? Mit dem Verb habiter. Französisch? Mit dem Verb habiter. Wie sagt man? Wie sagt man? In alle 3 Sprachen. Kochen in alle 3 Sprachen. Das ist ein bisschen wie Italienisch, aber mit der spanischen Aussprache.
Könntest du mir bitte 3 Sprachen nennen? In einer Sprache, die du willst? Bitte 3 Sprachen.
Na, okay. So, as I said, they are not for language experts, so it's not a method which is only for language experts. And but what is very important that the students are open and curious for the languages, that they have studied at least one foreign language before, even if they don't speak it perfectly, it doesn't matter, but it's useful before starting with 5-10 languages to have studied at least one foreign language before, and they have some free time, at least 5 minutes a day. For homework, because especially in the beginning, if they are beginners or if you are a beginner, then it's very important that you keep studying it. But as I said, you don't need to dedicate like hours. If you want to, if you have time, yes, but it works also with less. Okay, then I wanted to show another video. This is a group lesson. As I said, there are no polyglots, and ages, as you can see, different. There is a variety. And
könntest du mir bitte 3 Sprachen nennen? In einer Sprache, die du willst?
Yes, I will answer this question.
Come ti chiami? Eine Stadt immer?
Vivo
come si dice wie heißt du? Auf Italienisch.
Come ti chiami?
Und wie würdest du antworten? Und wie würdest du antworten?
Mi chiamo Lea.
Dove? Deshalb? Zusammen? Dove? Deshalb? Dove vivi? Und wie würdest du antworten? Dove vieni? Wie sagt man Proposition? Welche Proposition?
Ja.
Come si dice? Ich spreche Italienisch, Französisch, Deutsch und Portugiesisch.
Parlo Italiano, tedesco,
Italienische Aussprache? Italienische Aussprache? CE?
Francese.
Ja?
Francese.
Ja?
Portugiese, das letzte habe ich vergessen. Katalan, das letzte habe ich vergessen.
Catalano. Catalano. Kannst du mir bitte sagen, und kannst du mir...
Mucho.
Sehr gut.
Another video about one of the students you have seen, and it was a bit more, just a couple of lessons after that.
Könntest du mir bitte 3 Sprachen Spanisch?
Italiano y francés.
Muy bien.
Y
wie sagt man, ich spreche in 4 Sprachen? Wie sagt man, ich spreche in 4 Sprachen?
Je parle, hablo y falo. Hablo y falo.
Und wie sagt man die Zahlen von 1 bis 10? Die Zahlen von 1 bis 10 auf Spanisch und Italienisch.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 10.
Ich wohne in 3 verschiedenen Sprachen. Ich wohne in 3 verschiedenen Sprachen.
Eu moro em português. Vivo en español. Y en español. En italiano.
In Italiano, benissimo.
En italiano.
In Italiano, könntest du mir bitte...
Okay. Okay. So I want to answer maybe a couple of questions I see here. So first of all, to have different wrote, is it possible to have different teachers for the languages? On one hand, of course, it's possible, but the thing which is missing if you have many tutors for, one tutor for each language, is that they will not compare them for you. So either you're very good at compare them and you have more time to dedicate to this process. So if you're in a class with a teacher who can compare many languages at the same time, you don't have to do it yourself, and the teacher can make it much easier for you. If you're learning many languages at the same time with different tutors, this is efficient if you're able yourself to, then I think, my experience is you have to use, I don't want to say different method, but you should dedicate much more time, because it's not obvious to compare them if you're not used to, and in a class you switch from one language to the other. When you have different lessons, you will not switch from one language to the other, so you have to find a moment of your day, of your week, where you switch language. Otherwise it will not be easy to switch language while talking to someone. For example, you're at a language exchange, the video is over, otherwise I won't be talking. And okay, so maybe if you have more questions about it, I will say that later. I will talk about that later if you ask. And then about the levels, you can get to any level. So like I say that in the same time you would learn, for example, if you have 5 minutes, let's imagine you want to learn something, doesn't matter, math, languages, physics, doesn't matter. The same time, the same amount of time you would concentrate, you would dedicate to this activity. If you can split it, for example, for different languages, and you can get the same result you would get. Of course, if you study 1 hour a day, and instead of studying one language you can study 10 or 5 or 3, you need to study 10 at the same time, then you can get very good results anyway. If you study 5 minutes, it's good, but of course you will not improve as fast as 1 hour a day, but you will still improve as if you were studying only one language, like in a compact way. So, but I know it's difficult to believe, but you should really try in order to see, but it really works. Okay, let's go. Okay, I was telling you that the reason why The reason why it's very important that you have a tutor who can compare the languages is because you see at the same time all the differences. If you look at this slide, for example, when you talk about regular activities in French, Italian, and Spanish, you will see that or maybe you know, that in Italian and French you don't need the article if you're talking about a regular activity. Like il sabato va al cinema, il samedi je vais au cinéma. In Spanish, you need a plural for the article to imply that you do it regularly. And for example, in the small chart I wrote on the right, you can see the differences, you can see how it works. So it's a simple chart, but you can still see all the three languages at the same time, compare them, and see what the differences are. Or, for example, the same is when you have verbs, and you want to talk about your routine. For example, you have the chart is normally bigger because in class or with students we normally talk about the whole routine, what they do normally during the day. But they can see the verbs at the same time, and they can compare them, and they can see whether they have to concentrate on differences. So everything which is different, they have to try to remember. For example, for the stirsi is very similar. If you know that the pronoun at the end is si in Italian and se in Spanish, then they don't have to remember so much for example, for the infinitive. So, but they will train in class. Okay, so here, of course, it's like I wrote it, but it's if you can see, for example, conjugation between Italian and Spanish, you can see that there is really the same method, the same logic behind it. And for example, okay, I don't have so much time to explain the chart, but for example, E is the first and second person in Italian for all the conjugations. So in that sense, they don't have to remember so much for the three conjugations because they are the same, and for all the verbs there are no exceptions. And then you can see that, for example, the first one is apart from irregular verbs, is the same in Spanish. Okay. But anyway, okay. And then I think it's a bit too small, but I also wrote comparing charts for pronunciation, so that they can really have clear in mind what kind of sounds are in a language, and if a language is and how to pronounce. For example, it's for people who are learning Italian and Spanish or French, there is a special sound for CE or CI, and which is different in the three languages. So it's very important that if they haven't studied them before, that they can see all together and understand the differences. Okay. And as I said, it's very important to describe language features. For example, sometimes I'm talking about beginners here. So for example, in Italian, apart from foreign words and a couple of other words, they don't normally end in a consonant. So if they want to say a word and it's ending in a consonant, most probably Spanish is not Italian. Or, for example, some small features. So, you know, in Italian there are almost no accents apart from on the last letter. And in Spanish, at least, all the accents are in the same direction, which is not the case for example, Catalan. Or in French, especially when people speak, you will see for regular verbs that you have the same pronunciation for four of the persons, like je parle, tu parles, il parle, il parle. It's always like parle, but it's very easy to pick conjugations up if you notice the pattern. Okay, and as I said, reiterate the differences. It is very important, especially for words or structures which are very similar, because you don't want to be speaking Spanish, putting Italian words all the time inside. Yeah. So, for example, it's if you look at essays, entres, you will see that the only difference is really only the S. Okay, and for example, quattro and quattro, it's like pronunciation of the T, which is important, and the other one, as I did before, CI, is different in Italian, French, and Spanish. It's very important to remember how to pronounce it. Okay, someone asked about homework. I normally don't ask students to write during the class because I think it's a waste of time. Because during the class, after the class is very important, because it's very useful as a self-study. I normally ask to write short dialogues in several languages, because I think what people want to do most of the time is talk to other people. So it's very important that they are able to, and I don't want them to, normally we talk about sentences we can use in, so actually we practice dialogues and during the class, and afterwards they have to write more or less, okay, not like more or less the same type of dialogue so we are doing during the class. So it's because it's not a matter of doing something completely different or completely new at all. It's about revising what they did during the class, so that the next time they will still know what we did and we can build it out. So I don't. Sometimes maybe at the beginning something about verb conjugation, but actually you practice everything while you're writing dialogues, because in order to write dialogues you also have to conjugate verbs. On the next class, if it's in a school, I normally collect the homework, and next time I write on the whiteboard or blackboard the common mistakes, because especially at the beginning people have similar mistakes and we can talk about them, and it's without saying this person did that, this person did that, like common mistakes, which is much better for students. And I do insist that people should study at least 5 minutes every day, and this is a bit like a relief for students, because you don't have to, because otherwise you feel too much pressure. If you think, now I am going to have like 3 hours to dedicate to my language learning. I mean, not so many people have 3 hours every day to dedicate to that. So this is why it's much better that you do it 5 minutes every day, instead of trying to find 2 hours, maybe at weekends, because memory works in a way that within like the first 24 up to maximum 72 hours, you have to revise what you did before. Otherwise, for the first repetition. Otherwise, you will not be lost, but will be lost from the active point of view. This is why it's very important you do it. It's much more important to do 5 minutes every day and revise what we did during the class. When I teach languages which belong to a different alphabet, actually I think it's very nice and I like it very much, because many people are scared of different alphabets, and I think it's much better that they can start speaking from the very first day, because an alphabet, okay, I don't have the time to explain now, but for example, it's possible to learn alphabets, okay, not all the alphabets, but in 10 minutes, in half an hour, in 1 hour, but you don't even have to learn all the letters at the same time in order to start speaking, not at all. You can really start speaking to understand the sound, and especially because when you know how to read, you will start not to hear the pronunciation from other people most of the time, because when you have a word in front of you, you will try to pronounce it the way you think it should be pronounced. But if you just hear a word without even seeing how it is written, you will repeat it in a much more precise way compared to if you can see it. Okay, so so I think people can speak from the very first moment. They don't need to start saying very complicated sentences, but they can already get the feeling of the language. They can already say many things since the beginning. Okay, about course material. I mostly use self-made material, and I write material, I wrote material, I'm writing also books about them, and I wrote here the language combination of my multilingual courses I've written or I write. But you could also use similar books published in different languages. For example, from some of my classes I used those books which exist for example, for Italian, for English, for Spanish and French. What is very good is that students have a book. Sometimes they do like have a structure and be able to have a book in their hands, and they can compare the pages. They can compare because the contents is almost 100% the same in those books. What is not too good is that when they start to be too many languages, I personally think if I had 10 languages, if I wanted to say 10 languages and I had 10 books which are just the same, it would be too boring for me. So I have a visual memory, which is strong for me, and if everything looks the same, I cannot distinguish, I cannot really remember everything. So that is why I wrote my material for the classes so that students can really compare the languages and see it. But as I said, there are also alternatives, like similar books. Here it's as I said, they are almost the same. There are some words which are not the same in the book, but most of them they are. Okay. Some people ask whether it's possible to use normal good course focus. I think it's possible. The only thing if you study on your own, it's much more difficult to compare the languages because you have no comparison among them. It's the same thing I said before about having tutors for different languages. It works, but especially if you already have a good level. But otherwise, you do need to compare them. And but the good thing at least that there are many good books, and if you can compare them either on your own or with a good tutor, then you can also use them. Then it can be also effective. Okay, this is also just a picture of something that I use. You see many words, but as I said, I don't believe in memorizing words. I mean, there are people who can do that. I think when I did it as a child, it was fine. But now I don't want to be studying a list for a couple hours. So the reason why the picture is there is because we build conversations with something like that. Like they can say easy things, for example in Russian, and say I like that, I don't like that, and it works very well. Okay, I want to talk about teacher skills. And so teacher skills, if you want to find a good tutor, this is very important. If you find one for many languages, that they are able to switch from one language to the other, that they can compare the languages in a clear way, and they can highlight differences. As a teacher, if you're a teacher, you should be even more patient because, of course, you should reiterate the rules more times so that they're really integrate and be more motivating and encouraging than normal. But of course, any teacher I think should be motivating and encouraging. And of course, like in any class, but even more in those ones because they're a bit more challenging, you should be able to create a nice atmosphere and make them interact as much as possible. So for me, now I'm talking so much, but during my classes, my students speak because they don't want to learn how to listen, how to understand. So they do want to understand, but they do want to talk to people. So they have to be the ones who speak most of the time in the class. Okay, and if you're a teacher, what is good is that at least, so I love languages. I'm very happy to give multilingual classes. First, because I think it works, and because I think it's rewarding to see how it works, and students are very happy. I'm also happy because I can use many languages at the same time, and for me it's something which is challenging but very interesting. And you can also offer something that not everyone do. And in general, you can, as a teacher, also earn more because it's something which is very specialized. I wanted to thank you very much for your attention. I'm open to questions, and I would like to tell you that so you can see all my videos on the website, which is written there below. Speak from day one with Elisa.com. You can and you can see all the videos there. You can see some other information, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm open to questions. If you have any. Anyway, I read that someone said so in order to understand how to compare them or how easy it is to understand, of course you have to be in the class. Unfortunately, through webinar I cannot give a practical demonstration, but I can see through when I explain things, my students speak from the very first moment. So since they didn't speak the language before, I do believe that can be clear. But of course, with presentation, it's difficult to show it. Okay. Okay. Let me see. Reading the questions. So the question, how many languages I know and if I can think in all languages in a natural way. I speak 13 languages. I've learned 24, but I'm not fluent in 24, but I can teach 13. And I don't have any problems switching from one language to the other. Of course, from the if I study the language, if I just started studying language, it's okay. But so for the 13 languages, no problem switching from one to the other. And then. So I do not teach Korean, Japanese. I would love to, but I do think it's possible. And if you find someone who can speak all three, and I think so. I don't do it myself, but of course it's possible. About my classes, so I teach online, and so any time is available, and it depends on where you're living, but in general I wake up very early and I don't have any problem with time. One question was how many languages you can learn simultaneously. I don't think there is a limit itself. It depends on how much time you have. As I said, if you don't have time to learn, if you know that you don't have even 5 minutes to dedicate to languages, of course, or to any other thing, it's difficult to learn. The more time you have, the more languages you can study at the same time. And as I said, I think that in language learning, so like many languages simultaneously, it's more about the method than the time. You do need time, like anything you want to learn. You cannot say, I want to learn physics, but I will not open the book. How then? Yeah. But it's not a matter of time, it's a matter of method, I think.
Can you switch in language?
Yeah, I can. Je peux parler en français et j'ai étudié en France, en Italie et en Suisse et en Russie aussi. Я жила в Москве 2 года, мне очень понравилось. Posso parlare italiano ovviamente. Y también español. Viví 2 años en Barcelona. Ahora moro in Alemania. So I switch from one language to the other. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I personally only know 1 or 2 people who teach languages more languages at the same time. I don't know anyone else who does it online, but I'm sure there are. It's something new. It didn't exist before, so I guess there are not so many people, but I can imagine that some polyglots do it. But I cannot suggest anyone because apart from someone who does not teach online, I don't know anyone. I haven't tested myself, but I'm sure there are some. Why is it important to compare the languages? So it's very important to compare the languages because not to mix them up, to learn how to not to mix them up. If you don't compare the languages, they are not. They might be. Maybe you're a genius, you can do it without comparing them. But let's say, for example, when I was learning Catalan, Portuguese, for me, there are many things which are very similar. So if I don't focus on differences, I'm not sure I wasn't sure. Is the word the same? Is it different? Am I speaking like Catalan, or am I speaking? So not some features that were clear to me. They were either Catalan or Portuguese, but in some other cases I wasn't sure. So comparing them make you feel more confident and more able to switch from one language to the other. What's your special language? What do you mean by special? I like all the languages I learned, and I really like teaching Russian and German, because at least where I live, they're considered as difficult languages, and I really love, or Hindi, I love teaching Hindi, and I really like making languages easy for my students. Yeah, but I like all the languages, I lived in different countries, in 7 different countries, so I like them. The question about if it's what's my native language is Italian. Okay, so as I said during the presentation, I don't think it's if you choose languages from the same family or from a different family, there are advantages and disadvantages. What I personally would prefer, like learning many languages at a time, I would learn, it depends how many languages you had in mind learning, I would learn like 2, 3 of the same family, and maybe 1, 2 of not the same family, because it's a good number. You don't need necessarily to learn 10 languages at the same time, but you can have the advantage of learn similar languages, so be quicker in the grammar, in picking up words, but at the same time you can compare all the languages. So I think it really depends on what your interest is. I told you my preferences, but then I think the most important thing is that you're motivated in learning those languages because you want to learn those languages, and then this is what makes the difference. I don't know who asked Česko is váš brat. No, Česko is a friend of mine, like many other polyglots, and he's a very nice person. And I think yes, sorry, one question is if I'm able to think in all my languages I learned. Yes, I am, but of course it depends on the situation. If, for example, now I live in Germany, and of course I think much more often in German or in the languages I speak every day, instead of a language I use much less. But this is just a matter of, but I do think in many languages. And okay. What happened when they have to speak only one language and only one native speaker? Okay. So nothing. So for them, when they have to speak only one language, if they switched often enough from one language to the other, they just speak that language. So this is the point of multilingual classes, because if you learn languages separately, and then sometimes if you concentrate much more on one language instead of another, when it happens, for example, that you meet a native speaker, or not only a native speaker of a certain language, maybe your brain wants to go back to the language you learned the last, or the language you know the best, because like you feel more confident. It's also an unconscious process. But if you switch from one language to the other during the class, you don't have any problem speaking only one language. It's not that we do switch from one language to the other, but I also have on my website, if you want to have a look, there is another video where I show a short conversation only in Italian, only in French, and only in Spanish. So you can see it's not that we have to switch, the aim is not switching from one language to the other while talking to someone, it's to be able not to mix them up. How long it takes me to reach an advanced level? Normally 1 year. But it depends. For example, for some languages, like for Spanish, maybe it took me from 1 to 3 months, or I could have a conversation in Russian after 1-2 months. But of course, it was not perfect, not at all. And but I could have a conversation, and it depends. It depends where I'm living, and but it's. At which level do you speak those languages I teach? So most of the languages I teach, I have a C2 certificate for, like for Spanish, Italian, French, Russian, I don't know which order I said, but like I have a C2 certificate in 6 languages, and then I have a B2 certificate in 3 more, and then the other ones are a bit lower level, so I do only teach beginners for example, for Hindi. But I do really like very much seeing how they can be very good, because as I said, for me, the thing is that I will not teach you, I will always teach you something I'm sure of, and you can always be able to speak very good, very well. I wish I could show you something so that you could try. Okay, so I thank you very much for your attention. I think the time is over, so I wish you a good night, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and I really hope you are going to try in general to learn if you like that. And as I said, there is my website, and if you want to have a look at the videos, if the connection was not good, you couldn't see them, or if you want to see more videos, because I have more videos there. Okay, so thank you very much. Buona serata.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Today we had 3 wonderful talks. We had Kerstin, Steve Kaufman, and now Elisa Polese. Now, if you missed one of the talks, or maybe you missed a talk yesterday, or maybe you can't make it tomorrow, and you would like to watch all the talks, you can go to linguahackers.com/record. Let me put the link here for you guys. linguahackers.com/record, and there you can get access to all the talks. Now, for now, the talks are very low price, a very low fee. So make sure that you purchase before it's too late, before it gets more expensive. The prices are going up. I would also like to say that tomorrow we have 2 speakers. We have Cesco Reale, all the way from Italy, but now living in Switzerland, in the Schweiz, Swiss, in Switzerland. I like to say that Cesco is the king of Romance languages. This guy speaks all the Romance languages. He speaks Portuguese, Spanish, French, Italian, Romanian, Catalan, and he also speaks Latin at a very high level. So don't miss his talk. He's going to talk about language exchange. And then we have Mike Campbell, the founder of Glossica. Actually, the topic of his talk is a mystery. Nobody actually knows what he's going to talk about, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be interesting. Mike has a very interesting life story, so make sure that you also come for Mike Campbell, the founder of Glossica. Now, I also like to remind you guys that tomorrow we are starting earlier. Tomorrow we start with the second lesson of the bootcamp Portuguese. So if you're interested in learning Portuguese, make sure that you come 1 hour earlier to watch our free Portuguese lesson as well. We are starting tomorrow at 7 a.m. New York time, 1 p.m. Central European time, and 2 p.m. Moscow time. So tomorrow and on Sunday we are starting earlier, so make sure that you check the right time, the right schedule on our website, linguahackers.com. Thank you very much for your participation, and see you guys tomorrow. Lucas sinong linki Tony. Okay. In Hetki. Nyt se toimi. Oh, third speaker, respond, Victoria, will be giving a talk in Spanish. Okay, so tomorrow we have a talk in Spanish. We have a talk in Italian as well. So tomorrow is going to be a polyglot day, a multilingual day. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much for your participation. Okay, now it seems that the link is working again. That's good. Thank you very much. Obrigado, gracias, grazie, mulțumesc, merci, köszönöm szépen, obrigado, dziękuję, spasiba. What I'm missing? Good night. Aita. Hishe. Arigatou gozaimasu. Terima kasih. Thank you. Once sorry. Oh yes, and yes, here. Thank you, Ruslan, for posting the Facebook group link. So if you want to participate on our Facebook group, also make sure that you sign up for our newsletter on Facebook as well. Thank you very much. See you guys tomorrow. Oh yeah, Ačiū in Lithuanian, of course. How I forgot Lithuanian. Ačiū. Thank you guys.